Ancient people drilled holes in skulls to cure headaches. Comment what time it is where you are right now, because these 100 practices will blow your mind. Let's go. Drilling holes in skulls to cure headaches. Your head is pounding, and an ancient healer approaches with a sharp stone tool. Trepanation, MT5, that's what they called it, involved cutting circular holes into the skull while the person stayed conscious. No anesthesia, no sterile equipment, just raw bone and hope. Why would anyone agree to this? Ancient cultures believed evil spirits caused headaches, migraines, even seizures. The hole was supposed to give these spirits an escape route. Archaeologists have found skulls from 7,000 years ago with these precise cuts. And here's the twisted part. Many people survived. Their bones show healing around the edges, meaning they lived weeks or months after the procedure. The practice spread across continents, from Peru to France, from ancient Greece to tribal Africa. Different cultures independently decided drilling into the brain made perfect sense. Some healers even kept the bone pieces as lucky charms. Patients who survived probably felt relief, not because spirits escaped, but because the procedure sometimes reduced pressure from actual medical conditions like blood clots. Think about visiting a doctor today with a headache. You'd expect aspirin, maybe an MRI scan. Imagine instead being told to lie down while someone carves into your skull. Yet for thousands of years, this was cutting-edge medicine. Eating crushed gems as medicine. Picture yourself swallowing ground-up diamonds mixed with water, believing it'll cure your illness. Wealthy people across ancient civilizations, to LA, from China to medieval Europe, genuinely thought precious stones held healing powers inside them. Rubies for heart problems, emeralds for eye disease, sapphires for mental clarity. Rich families would literally grind these expensive gems into fine powder and consume them like vitamins. Some recipes mix the gem powder with honey or wine to mask the gritty texture. Chinese emperors paid fortunes for jade elixirs, convinced the stone's immortal essence would transfer into their bodies. European royalty drank crushed pearls dissolved in lemon juice, thinking it would cure everything from plague to depression. One medieval text recommended eating powdered diamonds to protect against poison. Ironic, since the sharp crystal fragments could actually damage your digestive system. The price tag made it worse. Only the ultra-wealthy could afford gem medicine, which somehow made it seem more legitimate. If something costs as much as a house, surely it must work. Right? Wrong. These people were literally eating their fortunes and getting zero medical benefit. Some died from intestinal injuries. Others wasted their family wealth on colorful rocks that did absolutely nothing. Modern analysis shows these gems have no nutritional value and no medicinal properties whatsoever. Using mercury to treat syphilis. Doctors once prescribed liquid metal as the cure for a deadly disease, and it killed faster than the infection itself. For over 400 years, mercury was the go-to treatment for syphilis, CFA, despite causing horrific side effects that everyone could clearly see. Patients would be rubbed with mercury ointment, forced to inhale mercury vapors, or even injected with the toxic substance directly. The treatment caused teeth to fall out, gums to rot away, and severe brain damage. People would drool uncontrollably, their mouths producing so much saliva that doctors actually thought this was a good sign. They believed the body was sweating out the disease. A popular saying emerged: "A night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury." Soldiers, sailors, and civilians alike suffered through this torture because medical authorities insisted it worked. Some patients spent years in mercury treatment centers, slowly poisoning themselves, while the syphilis continued destroying their bodies. The twisted logic? Mercury did make some symptoms temporarily disappear, but only because it was killing healthy tissue along with infected areas. Doctors mistook destruction for healing. Patients who survived often had permanent nerve damage, kidney failure, and mental problems, all from the cure rather than the disease. Even when better treatments emerged in the early 1900s, some doctors refused to abandon mercury. Centuries of medical tradition are hard to break, even when people are literally dying from your treatment method. Bleeding patients to balance body fluids. Feeling sick, ancient doctors would cut open your veins and drain pints of blood, genuinely believing it restored health. Bloodletting dominated medicine for over 2,000 years across every continent. Physicians thought 4 fluids controlled your body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much blood? Cut it out. Fever, headache, infection. Didn't matter. The answer was always the same: bleed the patient until they felt better or passed out. George Washington died, partly because doctors drained nearly half his blood trying to cure a throat infection. They removed about 4 pints in less than 24 hours. His body never recovered from the shock. Barbers performed most bloodletting procedures. Yes, the same people cutting hair. Red and white striped poles outside barber shops actually symbolize bloody bandages wrapped around poles. Leeches became medical tools, with hospitals keeping thousands of them specifically for draining blood. Patients grew weaker, paler, more exhausted, and doctors interpreted these symptoms as signs the treatment was working. Weakness meant bad blood was leaving the body. Wearing radium jewelry for energy. In the 1920s, people wore glowing necklaces and bracelets, completely unaware they were strapping radioactive poison to their skin. Radium became the hottest health trend after scientists discovered it glowed in the dark. Surely something so magical must be good for you, right? Companies marketed radium as a miracle element. Radium water promised eternal youth. Radium face creams claimed to erase wrinkles. Wealthy socialites wore radium-laced jewelry to parties, showing off how the pieces glowed green in dim lighting. Athletes rubbed radium ointment on sore muscles, believing the radiation would boost their performance. One entrepreneur sold Radithor, bottled water with radium dissolved in it. People drank it daily like a vitamin supplement. A famous steel millionaire consumed over 1,400 bottles before his jaw literally fell off from radiation poisoning. His bones became so radioactive that his grave still registers dangerous levels today, nearly a century later. Factory workers, mostly young women, painted watch dials with radium paint to make them glow. Supervisors told them to lick their brushes into fine points, meaning they swallowed radium with every stroke. Dozens died from bone cancer and jaw deterioration. Their bodies were so contaminated that they glowed in their coffins. The craze lasted almost 2 decades before people finally connected the deaths to radium exposure, binding feet to make them smaller. For 1,000 years in China, families deliberately broke their daughters' bones, calling it beauty. Foot binding turned tiny feet into a status symbol, and girls, as young as 5, endured this torture to become marriageable. Mothers would soak their daughters' feet in hot water to soften them, then bend all the toes except the big one underneath the foot. Tight cloth strips wrapped around, forcing the arch to curve unnaturally. Every few days, the bindings got tighter, crushing bones, tearing tissue, cutting off circulation. Walking became agony. Girls would cry through the night as their feet essentially folded in half. Many developed infections. Some lost toes to gangrene. The goal? Creating lotus feet, feet no longer than 3 to 4 inches. Grown women with bound feet could barely walk without support, taking tiny shuffling steps that society deemed elegant and desirable. Families believed bound feet meant their daughters would marry into wealthy families. Large feet signaled poverty and labor. NET. Women who worked in fields couldn't have crippled feet. So upper-class families proudly disabled their daughters to prove they didn't need them to work. Millions of women spent their entire lives in constant pain, unable to run, dance, or walk normally. Some couldn't even stand without assistance. The practice continued into the early 1900s, before finally being banned. Stretching necks with heavy rings. Among certain tribes in Southeast Asia and Africa, girls started wearing brass coils around their necks at age 5, adding more rings every year until their necks stretched to incredible lengths. 20 or more pounds of metal pressing down constantly, all to achieve what their culture called beauty. But wait, necks don't actually stretch. The weight of the rings slowly pushes down on the collarbones and compresses the ribcage over years. What looks like an elongated neck is actually deformed shoulders and a crushed upper body. Remove the rings suddenly, and the neck muscles are so weakened that the person can't hold their head up without support. Women wore these coils their entire lives, sleeping, eating, bathing with them on. The rings rubbed skin raw, causing infections and permanent scarring. Shoulder muscles atrophied from lack of use. Some women couldn't turn their heads without moving their entire torso. Why continue such an extreme practice? Tribes believed long necks protected women from tiger attacks. AT. The rings supposedly made necks too thick to bite. Others thought it made women less attractive to rival tribes, preventing kidnappings. Some simply followed tradition without questioning the suffering it caused. Modern women in these communities face an impossible choice. Keep the rings and suffer health problems, or remove them and face social rejection. Several who removed their coils needed months of physical therapy just to hold their heads upright again, filing teeth into sharp points. Across Indonesia, Africa, and parts of South America, people sat through excruciating dental procedures without any pain relief, voluntarily filing their teeth into fangs. No drills, no numbing agents, just rough stones grinding against enamel and nerve endings for hours. Tribes believed pointed teeth separated humans from animals, ironically making themselves look more predatory in the process. Coming-of-age ceremonies required teenagers to endure this torture as proof of their bravery. Elders would use rocks, shells, or metal files to sharpen every front tooth into a triangular point. Blood filled their mouths as the filing wore through enamel into the sensitive dentin beneath. Some procedures exposed the nerve completely, causing pain that lasted weeks or months. Infections were common and deadly. Without modern antibiotics, a simple tooth filing could lead to blood poisoning and death. But the social pressure was immense. Refuse the procedure, and you'd be considered a coward, unmarriageable, incomplete as a person. Young people literally chose permanent tooth damage over social rejection. Different cultures had different styles. Some filed teeth into points, others chiseled gaps between front teeth. A few carved horizontal grooves across all visible teeth. The Mayans went even further, drilling holes in teeth to insert jade and turquoise stones, frequently causing abscesses and jaw infections. Flattening baby heads with boards. Parents once strapped wooden boards to their newborn babies' skulls, intentionally reshaping the soft bones into elongated cones or flat surfaces. From ancient Egypt to Native American tribes, from the Pacific Islands to parts of Europe, cultures worldwide practiced cranial deformation on infants who couldn't consent or resist. Within days of birth, caregivers would wrap tight bindings around the baby's head, sometimes adding wooden planks or stone weights for extra pressure. Infants wore these contraptions constantly, sleeping, feeding, crying in discomfort, for months or even years, until their skull bones fused into the desired shape. Mayans preferred tall, sloped foreheads that came to a point at the crown. Pacific Islanders wanted wide, flat foreheads. Some tribes in South America created almost tubular skulls that looked barely human. Each culture believed their preferred head shape represented intelligence, nobility, or divine favor. Did it cause brain damage? Scientists still debate this. Some individuals showed no obvious cognitive problems, while others may have suffered developmental issues that went unrecognized in ancient societies. Either way, parents willingly risked their children's well-being for aesthetic conformity. Archaeologists find these modified skulls worldwide, proving millions of babies underwent this process across thousands of years. Imagine looking at your newborn and thinking, but you know what this tiny human needs? Completely different skull architecture, throwing virgins into volcanoes. At the edge of an active volcano, priests prepared a young woman for sacrifice, believing her death would prevent eruptions and ensure good harvests. Aztecs, Incas, and Pacific Island cultures all practiced volcano sacrifices, treating human lives as payment to angry mountain gods. Communities held elaborate ceremonies before the sacrifice. They dressed the chosen person in fine clothing, fed them special meals, and paraded them through villages. Some victims were drugged to make them compliant. Others went willingly, convinced their death served a greater purpose and would honor their families. When the moment came, priests would push or throw the victim into the crater, where they'd fall hundreds of feet before hitting molten lava or suffocating from toxic gases. Sometimes groups of people were sacrificed together during particularly dire situations like droughts or earthquakes. Archaeological evidence from South America reveals something even more disturbing. Some victims were children as young as 6 years old. Inca priests would march children up freezing mountain peaks to volcano summits, where cold and altitude sickness weakened them before the final sacrifice. Did it work? Obviously not. Volcanoes operate on geological processes that don't care about human offerings. Yet these practices continued for centuries because people desperately wanted to believe they had control over natural disasters. When eruptions didn't happen immediately after a sacrifice, communities took it as proof their offering succeeded, burying people alive with dead kings. When powerful rulers died in ancient civilizations, their servants, wives, and guards were forced into the tomb, sealed inside to serve their master in the afterlife. From Egypt to China, from Mesopotamia to West Africa, royal burials became mass graves for the living. Egyptian pharaohs took this to extremes. Dozens of servants would be killed or drugged and arranged around the burial chamber, in positions suggesting they'd continue their duties forever. Some tombs contained over 100 bodies: cooks, musicians, concubines, soldiers, all sacrificed because one important person died. Chinese emperors during the Shang dynasty buried entire courts with them. Archaeological digs have uncovered pits near royal tombs containing hundreds of skeletons, many showing signs of violent death. Workers who built the tombs were often killed afterward to protect the secrets of hidden treasure rooms. Some cultures took it further, at burying people alive and conscious. Sumerian royal tombs show evidence that attendants drank poison in the burial chamber, lying down in neat rows as the drugs took effect. Others were simply locked inside and left to suffocate or starve in complete darkness. Why would anyone agree? They didn't have a choice. Refusing meant execution anyway, but with your family punished as well. Some genuinely believed they'd continue living in a spiritual realm, not realizing they were trading their actual lives for a comforting myth. Eating mummies as medicine. Between the 12th and 18th centuries, European doctors prescribed ground-up Egyptian mummies as medication for almost everything. Pharmacies sold mummy powder right next to herbs and minerals, treating ancient human remains like vitamin supplements. Wealthy Europeans believed the preservation process gave mummies magical healing properties. Bitumen, the black resin used in embalming, supposedly contained life-extending essence. Doctors prescribed mummy powder for bruises, wounds, stomach problems, headaches, and even plague prevention. Demand became so high that Egypt couldn't supply enough ancient mummies. Entrepreneurs started creating fake ones, taking recently deceased bodies, drying them quickly, and grinding them into powder. European buyers couldn't tell the difference. They were literally consuming random corpses while thinking they were taking premium ancient medicine. King Francis I of France carried a pouch of mummy powder everywhere, mixing it with rhubarb extract whenever he felt ill. Wealthy families kept chunks of mummified flesh in their medicine cabinets, like we'd keep aspirin today. The practice only stopped when European doctors finally admitted, to sex, after centuries, that eating dead people provided zero medical benefit. Some physicians had known this all along but stayed quiet, because the mummy trade was extremely profitable. Imagine walking into a pharmacy and asking for ground human remains, and the pharmacist just weighs it out like it's flour. Using lead as makeup, women across ancient Rome, Elizabethan England, and 18th century Europe painted their faces with white lead powder, creating flawless complexions while slowly poisoning themselves to death. Beauty standards demanded pale skin, and lead-based cosmetics delivered that ghostly white appearance better than any natural ingredient. Ceruse, a mixture of white lead and vinegar, became the foundation makeup of choice for aristocrats. Women applied thick layers daily, covering their entire face, neck, and chest. The powder gave them the fashionable porcelain look that signaled wealth and status, while the lead absorbed through their skin, accumulating in their organs. Early symptoms seemed minor: hair loss around the hairline where the makeup was thickest, slight tremors in the hands, occasional stomach pain. Most women ignored these signs and kept applying more makeup to cover the skin damage the lead was causing. Their faces would develop grey undertones and lesions, so they'd pile on even thicker layers of the poisonous white powder. Queen Elizabeth I famously wore lead makeup so thick it formed a mask. By the end of her life, her face was reportedly scarred and damaged beyond recognition beneath the coating. Many noble women went bald from lead exposure, wearing elaborate wigs to hide the damage while continuing to poison themselves daily. Some women died from acute lead poisoning. Others suffered for years with muscle weakness, kidney failure, and brain damage before dying young. Drinking gladiator blood for strength. After brutal fights in Roman arenas, spectators would rush forward with cups, collecting fresh blood from wounded or dying gladiators to drink immediately. Romans genuinely believed consuming a warrior's blood transferred his strength, courage, and vitality directly into their bodies. Sick people paid premium prices for gladiator blood, convinced it could cure epilepsy, weakness, and various diseases. Vendors sold it outside the Colosseum, like modern sports merchandise. Wealthy Romans sent servants to collect blood the moment a gladiator fell, racing against other buyers for the freshest supply. Doctors actually prescribed this treatment. Medical texts from ancient Rome recommended drinking warm gladiator blood for seizure disorders, claiming the life force of a strong warrior could overcome spiritual weaknesses causing the illness. Patients would gulp down cups of blood mixed with wine to mask the metallic taste. Some Romans took it further, eating pieces of a gladiator's liver, believing the organ held concentrated power. Funeral games became feeding frenzies, with crowds fighting over body parts the moment a fighter died. Did anyone question drinking human blood from strangers? Apparently not enough people. The practice continued for centuries despite providing zero medical benefit and probably spreading blood-borne diseases. Romans were literally consuming disease-carrying fluids from men who died of infected wounds, thinking it would make them healthier. Burning witches to stop bad weather. During Europe's witch hunt craze from the 1400s through 1700s, communities executed thousands of people, blaming them for storms, crop failures, and unseasonable cold. Bad harvest. Must be witches cursing the fields. Hailstorm destroyed crops. Witches summoned it. Unusually cold summer. Witches are controlling the weather. Accusations flew fastest during climate disasters. Between 1560 and 1630, Europe experienced the Little Ice Age. Winters grew harsher. Summers stayed cool. Crops failed repeatedly. Instead of understanding natural climate patterns, panicked communities looked for someone to blame. Mostly women, especially elderly or socially isolated ones, became targets. Trials were rigged from the start. Accused witches faced impossible tests, thrown into water while bound, where floating proved guilt and drowning proved innocence. Either way, you died. Tortured until they confessed to flying on broomsticks and making deals with demons. Then burned alive in public squares while crowds watched, convinced they were protecting their crops and weather. Towns kept detailed records of witch burnings and weather afterward. When conditions didn't immediately improve, communities decided they hadn't burned enough witches yet. More accusations followed. More executions. More innocent people killed, while the actual weather patterns continued unchanged. Some regions executed entire families. Villages lost 10% of their female population to witch hunts, all because nobody understood that weather follows natural cycles beyond human control. Using arsenic to improve skin. Victorian women swallowed small doses of arsenic daily, believing the deadly poison would give them luminous, translucent skin. Beauty manuals from the 1800s actually recommended gradually increasing arsenic consumption to build tolerance while supposedly enhancing complexion. Arsenic complexion wafers became bestsellers. Companies marketed them as beauty tablets containing carefully measured poison doses. Women would start with tiny amounts, slowly increasing over weeks until they consumed what would normally be fatal levels. Sellers claimed this made skin glow from within, created a porcelain appearance, and erased blemishes. What really happened? Arsenic destroyed red blood cells, creating an artificial paleness that Victorians mistook for aristocratic beauty. It also caused fluid retention under the skin, temporarily smoothing out wrinkles and fine lines. Women looked in mirrors and saw improvements, not realizing they were watching their bodies slowly fail. Side effects piled up. Stomach pain, vomiting, diarrhea, hair loss, nerve damage. Some women's skin turned greyish. Others developed open sores. Many died from organ failure after years of steady poisoning. Yet beauty magazines kept promoting arsenic, with testimonials from women who hadn't died yet praising the results. Men used arsenic too, claiming it improved physical performance and stamina. Athletes took arsenic pills before competitions, genuinely believing poison enhanced their strength. Some collapsed mid-event from acute toxicity, sacrificing children to gods. Across ancient Carthage, priests selected the firstborn children of noble families, burning them alive in bronze statues as offerings to gods. Archaeologists have uncovered burial grounds containing thousands of cremated infant and child remains near temple sites, proving these sacrifices happened repeatedly over centuries. Parents were expected to show no emotion during the ceremony. Crying or protesting meant you lacked faith and dishonored the gods, which could bring divine punishment on your entire family. Mothers and fathers stood silently while their children were placed inside heated bronze figures of deities, the statues' arms designed to hold small bodies as flames consumed them from below. Musicians played loud drums and flutes to drown out the screams. Priests told families their child's sacrifice ensured military victories, good harvests, and protection from plagues. Communities gathered to watch, treating these deaths as sacred celebrations rather than tragedies. Similar practices appeared worldwide. Moche culture in ancient Peru sacrificed children during droughts, believing young blood would bring rain. Aztec priests killed children to honor specific gods during certain months, with different deities requiring different age groups. Some civilizations buried children alive in building foundations, thinking it blessed new construction. Skeletal remains show these children ranged from newborns to teenagers. Many show signs of being well-fed and healthy before death, suggesting families raised them specifically for sacrifice, knowing from birth what fate awaited them. Bathing in blood to stay young. Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory allegedly bathed in the blood of young women, convinced it would preserve her youth and beauty forever. Between 1585 and 1610, she may have tortured and killed hundreds of girls, draining their blood to fill her bathtub for these grotesque beauty treatments. Servants would bring peasant girls to her castle under false promises of work. Once inside, Bathory and her accomplices would drain the victim's blood into large vats. The Countess would immerse herself in the warm blood, believing the life force of young women would transfer through her skin, erasing wrinkles and maintaining her appearance. Historical records suggest she started with occasional blood rituals, but became increasingly obsessed as she aged. What began as dabbing blood on her face escalated to full-body baths. Some accounts claim she drank blood as well, thinking internal consumption worked faster than external application. Eventually, she targeted daughters of lesser nobility, which proved her downfall. When aristocratic families started losing children, authorities couldn't ignore it anymore. Investigators found bodies buried throughout her estate, with witness testimony describing unimaginable torture methods before the blood collection. Her accomplices were executed, but as nobility, Bathory herself was walled into her castle bedroom, spending her final 4 years in a small room before dying in 1614. No amount of blood had stopped her aging, just made her one of history's most notorious killers. Wearing bird beaks to avoid plague. During the Black Death, plague doctors walked through infected cities, wearing leather masks with long, curved beaks, stuffed with flowers, herbs, and spices. They genuinely believed bad smells caused disease, so blocking foul air with pleasant scents would prevent infection. Physicians filled these beaks with rose petals, lavender, camphor, mint, and myrrh. Some added ground-up precious stones or dried blood from patients who survived the plague. The more ingredients crammed into that beak, the better protected the doctor supposedly was. They'd breathe through layers of aromatic material, thinking fragrance created a barrier against sickness. Full plague doctor outfits were terrifying. Long black coats covering the entire body, gloves, wide-brimmed hats, glass eye covers, leather beaks protruding from their faces. Walking through plague-ridden streets, they looked like monstrous birds of death, which probably traumatized dying patients even more. Did any of this work? Absolutely not. Plague spreads through fleas on rats and person-to-person contact, not through bad smells. The heavy leather outfits may have accidentally provided some physical barrier against flea bites, but the beak full of flowers did nothing except make breathing difficult. Plague doctors had one of history's worst survival rates. Most died within months of starting work, yet they kept wearing those bizarre bird masks, convinced the problem was using the wrong herbs rather than the entire concept being useless. Putting bread on wounds to heal them. For centuries across Europe and America, people pressed moldy bread directly onto open wounds, believing it promoted healing and prevented infection. Families kept old bread specifically for medical purposes, waiting for it to develop the right kind of mold before applying it to cuts, burns, and surgical sites. Folk medicine taught that green or blue mold possessed magical healing properties. Grandmothers passed down recipes: soak the moldy bread in water or milk, mash it into a paste, then pack it into wounds and wrap with cloth. Leave it there for days, adding fresh moldy bread as needed. Surprisingly, this sometimes actually worked, not because of magic, but because certain molds produce penicillin, NET, the antibiotic Alexander Fleming wouldn't officially discover until 1928. Ancient healers accidentally stumbled onto antibiotic properties without understanding the science behind it. But most of the time, bread poultices caused more harm than good. Random molds from household bread could be any species, many toxic or infection-causing. People were essentially gambling with their wounds, hoping the mold growing on their stale bread happened to be beneficial rather than deadly. Soldiers in various wars used bread poultices on battlefield injuries. Some survived despite this treatment. Others died from infections the moldy bread introduced. Doctors in the 1800s still recommended bread poultices in medical journals, completely unaware they were prescribing random fungal exposure to vulnerable patients. Using spiderwebs to stop bleeding. Across ancient Greece, Rome, and even into the early 20th century, people gathered fresh spiderwebs, pressing them directly into bleeding wounds as makeshift bandages. Soldiers carried balls of collected spiderwebs into battle. Medics recommended them for surgery, and rural families kept spiderweb supplies in their homes. Warriors would find large webs, carefully roll them into dense balls, and stuff them into deep cuts or sword wounds. The sticky silk supposedly helped blood clot faster, while the web itself acted as a natural bandage. Doctors noticed that wounds packed with spiderwebs often stopped bleeding quicker than those left untreated. Modern science reveals they weren't entirely wrong. Spider silk contains vitamin K, which actually does promote blood clotting. The protein structure in the silk creates a scaffold that helps platelets stick together and form clots. Ancient healers accidentally discovered legitimate medical properties, but their application method had serious problems. Spiderwebs collected from random locations carried bacteria, fungal spores, insect parts, and environmental contaminants. Shoving this contaminated material into open wounds introduced infections far worse than the original injury. Many patients survived the bleeding only to die days later from infected wounds festering with bacteria. Some cultures took it further, using spiderwebs mixed with honey, vinegar, or animal fat to create healing pastes. Even into the 1900s, rural areas still recommended spiderwebs for minor cuts, before modern medicine finally replaced this risky practice. Drinking urine as health tonic. For thousands of years across India, China, and ancient Rome, people drank their own urine every morning, convinced it contained healing properties and prevented disease. Practitioners called it liquid gold and claimed it cured everything from infections to aging. Ancient Roman physicians recommended drinking young boys' urine for various ailments, believing youth transferred through bodily fluids. Indian Ayurvedic texts described elaborate urine therapy protocols, NUS. Drink the middle stream of your first morning urine, while avoiding the first and last portions. Some traditions mixed urine with herbs or honey to improve the taste. Wealthy Romans paid for gladiator urine specifically, thinking warriors produced superior healing liquid. Chinese medicine incorporated aged urine that had been stored for months, claiming fermentation enhanced its medicinal power. Desperate plague victims drank urine hoping to survive, while others used it preventatively as a daily health practice. Modern analysis shows urine is simply waste your kidneys filtered out. Drinking it forces your body to process the same toxins again. It contains urea, excess salts, and compounds your body deliberately removed. Consuming it provides zero health benefits and can actually cause kidney damage if practiced regularly. Yet, even into the 1900s, some alternative medicine advocates promoted urine therapy. Books described urine fasting, CODA, drinking only your own urine for days or weeks. Believers claimed it cured cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, with zero scientific evidence supporting any of these claims. Smoking to cure asthma. In the 1950s, doctors prescribed cigarettes specifically marketed for asthma relief, telling patients that smoking would open their airways and ease breathing problems. Pharmaceutical companies sold asthma cigarettes containing tobacco mixed with belladonna, stramonium, and other herbs. Physicians genuinely believed smoke inhalation relaxed bronchial tubes. Medical journals published studies claiming cigarette smoke reduced asthma attacks. Advertisements featured doctors in white coats recommending specific cigarette brands for respiratory health. Parents gave children asthma cigarettes during attacks, watching them inhale toxic smoke while thinking they were providing medicine. Some asthma cigarettes came in prescription tins from pharmacies. Patients would light up during wheezing episodes, taking deep drags to medicate their lungs. Doctors suggested smoking multiple cigarettes daily as preventative treatment, essentially prescribing the exact thing that damages lungs to people with already compromised respiratory systems. The temporary relief patients felt came from certain herbs in the mixture that mildly dilated airways, but the tobacco smoke caused long-term damage that made asthma worse over time. People became addicted while their lung function steadily declined, yet doctors kept recommending more smoking. Even after scientists began proving cigarettes caused cancer and lung disease in the 1930s and 40s, asthma cigarette manufacturers fought to keep their products on the market. It took decades of overwhelming evidence before this practice finally ended. Giving cocaine to children for toothaches. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, pharmacies sold cocaine drops for teething babies, marketed as safe, effective pain relief that parents should keep stocked at home. Major pharmaceutical companies produced children's cocaine toothache drops with cheerful packaging showing happy kids. Mothers would rub cocaine solution directly onto their baby's gums multiple times daily. Advertisements promised instant relief from teething pain, claiming the product was instantaneous and completely harmless. Drugstores displayed these cocaine remedies right next to candy, treating a powerful narcotic like a routine household item. Pediatricians recommended cocaine for fussy infants, suggesting parents apply it whenever babies cried. Some formulations mixed cocaine with alcohol, creating an incredibly potent combination for tiny developing bodies. Companies sold attractive tins and bottles designed to appeal to mothers, with labels featuring smiling children and reassuring medical claims. Babies became addicted to cocaine from repeated applications. Some overdosed from doses considered normal by doctors of the era. Parents noticed their children became unusually calm and quiet after treatment, not realizing they were witnessing drug-induced stupor rather than pain relief. Even dental procedures used pure cocaine as a local anesthetic for children. Dentists would inject it directly into young patients' gums, using doses that would be considered dangerous even for adults today. Nobody questioned giving children one of the most addictive substances known, until addiction and death cases became impossible to ignore. Using leeches to cure everything. From ancient Egypt through the 1900s, doctors applied blood-sucking leeches to patients' bodies, treating headaches, fevers, infections, mental illness, and practically every condition imaginable. Hospitals maintained tanks holding thousands of leeches, using them as frequently as modern doctors prescribe antibiotics. Physicians believed leeches removed bad blood causing disease. They'd place dozens of leeches on a single patient, letting them feed until engorged with blood before falling off. Some treatments used over 100 leeches at once. Medical supply companies bred leeches commercially, shipping them to hospitals worldwide in special containers. Leeches would attach with their sucker mouths, injecting anticoagulants to keep blood flowing while they fed. Each leech consumed about a tablespoon of blood over 20 to 30 minutes. Doctors applied them to temples for headaches, near infections to draw out disease, or across the chest for heart problems. Patients weakened dramatically from blood loss. Many died from anemia after repeated leech treatments drained too much blood. Others developed infections when leeches carried bacteria from previous patients. Despite these deaths, medical schools taught leech therapy as essential medicine for centuries. Interestingly, modern medicine has actually brought leeches back for specific, legitimate uses. They help restore blood flow after reconstructive surgery and skin grafts. But ancient doctors used them for everything, applying medieval superstition where today we use them with actual scientific understanding of how they work. Eating clay to aid digestion. Across Africa, South America, and rural America, people deliberately ate handfuls of clay, believing it settled upset stomachs and removed toxins from their bodies. Pregnant women consumed clay daily, thinking it provided essential minerals and prevented morning sickness. Certain clay types became famous for medicinal properties. Families passed down knowledge of which clay deposits were safe to eat versus dangerous ones. Some communities baked clay into cakes or mixed it into drinks. Others chewed raw clay straight from the ground, consuming several spoonfuls per day as routine health maintenance. Geophagy, the practice of eating earth, appeared in medical texts, recommending specific clays for diarrhea, poisoning, and digestive complaints. Enslaved people in America ate clay to cope with malnutrition, while some plantation owners provided clay rations thinking it kept workers healthy. Modern science shows certain clays can actually bind to some toxins and bacteria in the digestive system, but eating random dirt carried massive risks. Soil contains parasites, heavy metals, bacteria, and harmful organisms. People who regularly ate clay often developed intestinal blockages, malnutrition from minerals, interfering with nutrient absorption, and parasitic infections. Some clays contained lead or arsenic from natural geological processes. Consumers slowly poisoned themselves while believing they were detoxifying. Children who grew up watching adults eat clay adopted the habit, perpetuating dangerous practices across generations. Even today, some alternative medicine advocates promote healing clays, though at least modern versions are processed and tested, rather than scooped directly from random dirt. Wearing garlic to ward off evil. Throughout medieval Europe and ancient civilizations, people hung garlic around their necks, convinced it created an invisible barrier against demons, vampires, and evil spirits. Entire families wore garlic necklaces constantly, sleeping with garlic under pillows and rubbing it on doorways for protection. Plague outbreaks intensified garlic use. Physicians stuffed garlic into their masks alongside herbs, while citizens wore it hoping supernatural forces causing disease would stay away. Some ate raw garlic cloves daily, others bathed in garlic water, and many wore so much garlic they reeked constantly. But at least the evil spirits supposedly kept their distance. Sailors carried garlic on long voyages to prevent sea monsters and bad luck. Soldiers wore garlic into battle, believing it made them invincible. Mothers tied garlic pouches around babies' necks to protect them from witches stealing their souls at night. Wedding ceremonies included garlic rituals to ensure evil couldn't curse the marriage. Interestingly, garlic does have real antimicrobial properties. People wearing garlic might have accidentally repelled disease-carrying insects with the strong smell, while consuming it provided minor immune benefits. But ancient people didn't understand biochemistry. They genuinely thought garlic scared away invisible demons. Communities ostracized anyone refusing to wear garlic during crises. Neighbors suspected you of being a witch or demon yourself if you didn't participate in garlic protection rituals. Social pressure forced people to smell terrible year-round just to avoid suspicion. Burying bones under houses for luck. Before constructing new buildings, ancient cultures buried animal bones and sometimes human remains beneath foundations, believing it blessed the structure and protected inhabitants from misfortune. Builders considered construction incomplete without proper bone burial rituals. Romans placed horse skulls under doorways, thinking it brought prosperity. Celtic communities buried dog skeletons in house corners to guard against evil spirits. Some cultures used cat bones specifically, killing cats during construction ceremonies and sealing their remains within walls or beneath floors. Archaeological digs under old European buildings consistently find deliberate bone deposits. Foundation trenches contain carefully arranged animal skeletons, sometimes with coins or other ritual objects. Builders followed specific placement rules and used certain bones in certain locations to maximize protective power. Why bones? Ancient people believed death and life energy intertwined. A creature's bones contained its spirit essence, which would remain in the building forever as a supernatural guardian. Homeowners felt safer knowing protective spirits were literally built into their walls. Some traditions required fresh kills. Builders would sacrifice animals during groundbreaking ceremonies, immediately burying the bodies in wet concrete or under cornerstone placements. Construction workers who refused to participate in these rituals faced social rejection or lost their jobs. Even into the 1700s and 1800s, rural builders continued burying bones for luck. Modern renovations of old houses still occasionally uncover mysterious animal skeletons sealed within walls, evidence of ancient superstitions that made perfect sense to our ancestors. Killing cats to stop disease. During the Black Death pandemic, European authorities ordered mass cat exterminations, convinced these animals spread plague through demonic possession or evil vapors. Cities passed laws requiring citizens to kill cats on sight, offering bounties for dead cat bodies as proof of compliance. Pope Innocent VIII officially declared cats instruments of Satan in 1484, encouraging widespread feline massacre. Towns organized cat-burning festivals, where hundreds were thrown into bonfires simultaneously. People hunted cats through streets, killing them with clubs, drowning them in rivers, or sealing them in barrels and setting them ablaze. Communities believed eliminating cats would stop disease from spreading. Instead, they created the perfect conditions for plague to explode. Cats naturally hunt rats, and rats carried the fleas that actually transmitted plague bacteria. By killing cats, Europeans removed the one predator controlling rat populations. Rat numbers skyrocketed without cats keeping them in check. Plague spread faster and killed more people precisely because of the cat extermination campaigns. Yet authorities kept ordering more cat killings, unable to connect the dots between fewer cats, more rats, and worse plague outbreaks. Some regions lost nearly their entire cat population. Generations grew up without seeing cats, viewing them as mythical evil creatures rather than normal animals. It took centuries for cat populations to recover after the plague finally subsided. Ironically, Areas that ignored cat-killing orders and maintained healthy cat populations experienced lower plague death rates, though nobody understood why at the time. Using dung as bandages. For thousands of years across Egypt, India, and Europe, healers packed fresh animal dung directly into open wounds, believing it prevented infection and accelerated healing. Cow dung was particularly popular, though horse, pig, and even human feces found medical applications. Egyptian medical papyri from 1500 BC recommend crocodile dung mixed with honey for wound treatment. Greek physicians prescribed dried pigeon droppings ground into powder. Roman soldiers carried bags of animal manure to treat battlefield injuries. Healers would press warm dung into deep cuts, burns, and surgical sites, then wrap everything with cloth to hold the feces in place. Why would anyone think excrement heals wounds? Ancient medicine believed feces contained life-giving warmth and natural substances that drew out poisons. Some cultures thought the heat from fresh dung killed disease spirits. Others noticed wounds. Sometimes survived this treatment, not understanding they succeeded despite the dung, not because of it. Patients who didn't die from septic shock often developed horrific infections. Dung contains countless bacteria species, many deadly to humans. Clostridium tetani, which causes tetanus, thrives in animal feces. People literally introduced lockjaw bacteria directly into their wounds while thinking they were preventing infection. Even into the 1900s, some rural communities still used cow dung poultices for burns and cuts. Folk healers mixed dung with herbs, creating pastes they genuinely believed had healing powers, completely unaware they were spreading fecal bacteria into vulnerable tissue, giving babies wine to help them sleep. Parents throughout history gave infants wine, beer, and spirits, treating alcohol as a safe sleep aid for fussy babies. Medical guides from ancient Rome through the 1800s recommended diluted wine for teething pain, colic, and general infant restlessness. Mothers would dip cloths in wine and let babies suck on them like pacifiers. Others mixed wine directly into milk bottles or spoon-fed it to crying infants. Pharmacies sold soothing syrups containing high alcohol content specifically marketed for babies. One popular product from the late 1800s contained 46% alcohol, stronger than most modern liquors. Physicians prescribed alcohol for sick children, claiming it provided nutrition and calmed fevers. Hospital nurseries kept wine on hand for infant patients. Wealthy families gave babies fine wine, while poor families used whatever cheap alcohol they could afford. Either way, babies were being systematically drugged with a substance their tiny bodies couldn't process. Babies did stop crying after consuming alcohol, because they passed out from intoxication. Parents mistook alcohol-induced stupor for peaceful sleep, never realizing they were poisoning their children's developing brains. Some infants died from alcohol poisoning when parents gave just a little more to ensure better sleep. Even after doctors began understanding alcohol's dangers, the practice continued. As late as the early 1900s, parenting books still recommended wine for teething babies, though thankfully public health campaigns finally ended this widespread child endangerment. Wearing amulets made from animal parts. Across every ancient culture, people wore necklaces strung with animal teeth, claws, organs, and bones, believing these body parts transferred the creature's powers to the wearer. A bear's tooth supposedly gave strength, eagle talons granted sharp vision, wolf fangs provided courage. Hunters would harvest specific body parts immediately after kills, performing rituals, while the animal's spirit was still fresh. Shamans and priests prescribed particular animal parts for different ailments or desired qualities. want to run faster, wear deer hooves, need better hearing, carry dried rabbit ears, hoping for wisdom, string owl eyes around your neck. Some amulets used internal organs. People wore pouches containing dried animal hearts, believing it literally gave them more heart. Others carried preserved animal genitals for fertility or virility. Warriors wore enemy bones as trophies and power sources. Sometimes human bones from defeated opponents. Markets sold animal part amulets like modern jewelry stores sell gold chains. Vendors displayed tables covered with teeth, claws, and mysterious dried organs. Buyers paid premium prices for rare animal parts. A lion's tooth cost more than most people earned in months. Children received their first animal amulets as infants. Protective parents hung rabbit feet, bird claws, or small bones around babies' necks to ward off illness and bad luck. Growing up, wearing dead animal parts felt completely normal. Even today, some cultures continue these traditions. Rhinos and elephants face extinction partly because people still believe their body parts contain magical properties worth killing for. Eating human flesh for power. Within certain tribal societies and ancient civilizations, warriors consumed parts of defeated enemies, believing this ritual transferred the victim's strength, courage, and life force directly into their own bodies. Ritualistic cannibalism appeared across Aztec, Fijian, Maori, and various other cultures throughout history. Aztec priests would sacrifice captives atop temple pyramids, then distribute the flesh to warriors and nobles. Participants believed eating an enemy's heart gave them that person's bravery. Consuming brain matter supposedly transferred knowledge and intelligence. Some cultures prepared elaborate meals from human remains, treating it like sacred communion rather than murder. Fijian warriors specifically targeted enemy chiefs and respected fighters. Killing and eating a powerful opponent meant absorbing their mana, evermanu, spiritual power, and prestige. Communities held feasts, celebrating successful raids, where human flesh was the main course. Children grew up watching adults consume enemy flesh as a normal part of warfare. Beyond warfare, some cultures practiced mortuary cannibalism, eating deceased family members to keep their spirits within the tribe. Relatives would consume small amounts of their loved one's body, believing it honored the dead and preserved their essence in the living. Medical consequences were severe. Prion diseases like kuru spread through populations, practicing cannibalism, causing progressive brain degeneration. Entire communities suffered neurological disorders from repeatedly consuming human neural tissue, yet continued the practice because cultural beliefs outweighed visible health consequences. Bloodletting with dirty tools. Until the late 1800s, barbers and physicians used the same unwashed blades on patient after patient, slicing veins open without any concept of sterilization or germ theory. Bloodletting tools passed directly from one person's open wound to another's, spreading diseases nobody understood yet existed. Practitioners kept lancets, UCA, small sharp blades, in their pockets or bags, wiping them on dirty cloths between uses at best. Some never cleaned their tools at all, believing blood was simply blood and cleanliness didn't matter. Barber shops displayed blood-stained instruments as proof of experience. The more blood, the more customers they treated. Patients would sit in chairs still wet with the previous person's blood. Doctors made incisions with blades contaminated by dozens of prior patients. Hepatitis, syphilis, and countless bacterial infections spread through these shared instruments. Communities experienced mysterious disease clusters, never connecting them to the blood-covered tools their trusted healers used. Wealthier patients sometimes owned personal bloodletting kits to avoid sharing instruments with commoners, but even these private tools stayed unsterilized between uses. Families passed down bloodletting equipment through generations, the blades carrying decades of accumulated contamination. Medical schools taught proper bloodletting techniques but said nothing about cleaning tools. Textbooks described ideal vein locations and how much blood to drain, while completely ignoring that dirty instruments killed more patients than the supposed bad blood they were removing. Only after germ theory emerged in the mid-1800s did doctors finally start sterilizing their tools, using prayers instead of surgery. Throughout medieval Europe and into colonial America, religious authorities often banned surgical procedures, insisting prayer and divine intervention were the only legitimate treatments for serious injuries and conditions. Physicians who attempted surgery risked excommunication or execution for defying God's will. Church doctrine taught that cutting into the body violated its sacred nature. Only God could decide who lived or died. Human intervention through surgery was seen as playing God. Patients with treatable conditions, appendicitis, hernias, infected wounds needing amputation, FTA, were told to pray harder instead of receiving surgical care. Monks and priests gathered around dying patients, chanting prayers while infections spread and treatable injuries became fatal. Families watched loved ones suffer for days or weeks, forbidden from seeking surgical help under threat of eternal damnation. Communities accepted preventable deaths as God's plan rather than medical neglect. Some surgeons operated secretly, risking their lives to save patients. These underground practitioners developed surgical techniques in hidden rooms, unable to share knowledge openly or train apprentices publicly. Medical progress stalled for centuries because religious law prioritized prayer over intervention. Even after surgical bans lifted, many people still chose prayer exclusively. Religious communities rejected surgery as faithless, believing true believers should trust God completely rather than human doctors. Some still maintain these beliefs today, though modern medicine has proven surgery's effectiveness beyond any doubt. Countless preventable deaths occurred simply because cutting into flesh was considered more sinful than letting people die. Drinking molten gold for immortality. Alchemists and emperors across China, India, and Europe consumed liquid gold, convinced the precious metal's incorruptible nature would transfer immortality to anyone brave enough to drink it. Chinese emperors spent fortunes on gold elixirs, desperately seeking eternal life through metallurgy. Alchemists developed elaborate recipes for preparing drinkable gold. They'd heat gold to extreme temperatures, mix it with mercury and other substances, then convince wealthy patrons to consume the toxic mixture. Some recipes required drinking gold dissolved in acids. Others involved gold powder, suspended in wine or honey. Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang, Tie Shi, famous for the Terracotta Army, died from mercury and gold poisoning after years of consuming immortality elixirs. His physicians kept increasing doses, believing more gold meant longer life. Instead, the metals accumulated in his organs, causing tremors, mental deterioration, and eventually death. Multiple Chinese emperors died this way, yet their successors continued the practice. Each new ruler believed previous emperors used the wrong formula. Surely their alchemists had perfected the mixture. Royal courts employed dozens of alchemists, competing to create the ultimate gold elixir, with emperors testing new formulas on themselves. Indian Ayurvedic texts described gold ash preparations, gold heated and ground into powder, then mixed with herbs. Wealthy patients consumed these preparations for vitality and longevity. Some suffered heavy metal poisoning, others simply wasted fortunes on ineffective treatments. Gold is chemically inert and passes through the body without being absorbed, making it completely useless as medicine. while the mercury and acids used to dissolve it actively poisoned consumers. Bathing in wine for health. Roman emperors and wealthy nobles filled entire bathtubs with wine, immersing themselves in expensive alcohol, believing it cleansed toxins, improved skin, and extended life. Cleopatra famously bathed in wine mixed with milk, thinking the combination preserved her legendary beauty. Elite Romans would heat hundreds of gallons of wine to body temperature, adding herbs and flower petals before soaking for hours. Servants constantly topped up the tub as wine evaporated or absorbed into skin. A single bath could cost more than a common worker's yearly wages. Yet aristocrats considered wine bathing essential healthcare. Medical texts from ancient Rome recommended wine baths for various ailments. Gout, bathe in red wine; skin problems, white wine baths; joint pain, wine heated with rosemary. Physicians prescribed specific wine types and temperatures for different conditions, creating elaborate bathing protocols. Their wealthy patients followed religiously. Some nobles bathed in wine daily, wasting enormous quantities of drinkable alcohol on a practice that provided zero health benefits. The alcohol evaporated quickly, leaving bathers sitting in expensive grape juice. Any perceived skin improvements came from the natural acids in grapes, not magical wine properties. During wine shortages, wealthy families hoarded wine for bathing, while common people went without any alcohol at all. Emperors requisitioned wine supplies from provinces specifically for their bathing rituals, treating healthcare luxury as more important than citizens having wine to drink. Eventually, economic reality ended the practice. Wine became too valuable to literally soak in, even for the super rich. Wearing coral to prevent illness. For centuries across Mediterranean and Asian cultures, people wore coral jewelry, believing the organic material actively repelled disease, evil spirits, and bad luck. Families passed down coral amulets through generations, treating them as essential protective equipment rather than simple decoration. Ancient Romans hung coral branches above children's beds to ward off illness and nightmares. Italian mothers tied coral pieces to babies' clothing, convinced it prevented sudden infant death and childhood diseases. Sailors wore coral necklaces, believing it calmed storms and prevented drowning, even though coral obviously can't control weather or buoyancy. Markets specialized in medicinal coral, pieces selected specifically for protective properties rather than appearance. Vendors charged premium prices for coral from certain depths or locations, claiming these had stronger preventative powers. Red coral was most valued. The deeper the red color, the more powerful the protection supposedly became. Physicians incorporated coral into their practices. Some ground coral into powder for patients to consume. Others prescribed wearing coral against bare skin to maximize its protective contact. Medical texts described coral as having cooling properties that balanced body temperature and prevented fevers. Wealthy families owned elaborate coral collections. People entire rooms displaying coral branches like trophy cases. They believed surrounding themselves with coral created protective barriers that disease couldn't penetrate. During plague outbreaks, coral prices skyrocketed as panicked citizens bought every piece available. Obviously, coral provided zero protection. People wearing coral died from diseases at the same rates as everyone else, but survivors credited their coral, reinforcing the superstition for future generations. Using ground pearls as antidote. Across China, India, and medieval Europe, physicians prescribed crushed pearls, claiming the powder neutralized any poison and cured countless diseases. Wealthy patients consumed ground pearls, mixed into drinks, believing the gem's purity could cleanse their bodies of toxins and illness. Chinese emperors kept jars of pearl powder in their palaces as emergency antidotes. Whenever they feared assassination by poisoning, They'd swallow spoonfuls of ground pearls dissolved in wine or tea. Royal physicians taught that pearls formed in pure ocean water, making them nature's perfect purification agent. Indian Ayurvedic medicine incorporated pearl powder into elaborate treatments. Healers claimed it cooled excess body heat, calmed anxiety, improved eyesight, and strengthened bones. They ground pearls into fine powder using mortar and pestle, sometimes spending hours creating enough for a single dose. European nobility drank pearl-infused potions during plague outbreaks, convinced the gems would prevent infection. Some recipes mixed pearl powder with gold dust and crushed rubies, combining multiple expensive materials into one useless but incredibly costly medicine. Pearls are calcium carbonate, 9Sp2, the same substance found in chalk and antacid tablets. Consuming them provided mild antacid effects and nothing else. No poison neutralization, no disease prevention, no mystical purification. Wealthy people were literally eating expensive chalk while convinced they'd purchased magical protection. Families bankrupted themselves buying enough pearls to grind into medicine. A single treatment could cost more than a house, all for what amounted to powdered seashell with zero medicinal value beyond basic calcium, killing albinos for magic potions. In parts of Africa, traditional healers murdered people with albinism, using their body parts to create potions they claimed brought wealth, success, and supernatural power. This horrific practice continues in some regions even today, with albino individuals living in constant fear of being hunted. Witch doctors convinced communities that albino bones, skin, and hair contained magical properties. They'd pay hunters to kidnap or kill albinos, then dismember the bodies to create medicine sold at outrageous prices. Buyers believed drinking potions made from albino body parts would make them rich or cure their problems. Families sometimes killed their own albino children for profit. Miners bought albino bones to bury in excavation sites, believing it would help them find gold or diamonds. Fishermen wove albino hair into their nets, thinking it guaranteed bigger catches. Politicians purchased albino limbs, convinced it would help them win elections. Albino children grew up knowing their body parts were considered more valuable than their lives. Many were kidnapped from schools or homes, never seen again. Parents hid albino children indoors for years, afraid to let them outside where witch doctors' agents might spot them. International organizations work to end these murders, but deep-rooted superstitions persist. Some communities still believe albino body parts hold magic, despite zero evidence supporting these claims. Hundreds have died, victims of beliefs that treat human beings as ingredients rather than people. Modern education slowly changes attitudes, yet albinos in certain regions still face deadly danger simply because of their genetic condition, beating sick people to drive out demons. Across medieval Europe and various traditional societies, healers physically beat ill patients with sticks, whips, or fists, believing violent strikes would force disease-causing demons to flee the body. Mental illness, epilepsy, and mysterious ailments all received the same brutal treatment. Exorcists would tie patients down and systematically beat them while chanting prayers or incantations. They targeted specific body parts believed to harbor demons: the head for madness, the chest for breathing problems, the stomach for digestive issues. Some sessions lasted hours, leaving patients bruised, broken, and traumatized. Communities gathered to watch these healing beatings, treating them as legitimate medical procedures. Families paid healers to beat their sick relatives, genuinely believing violence expelled evil spirits. Patients who survived and recovered, likely from natural healing despite the abuse, became proof the method worked. Children with seizures receive particularly harsh beatings. Healers interpreted convulsions as demons struggling to escape, so they'd beat harder thinking they were close to success. Many children died from their injuries, but communities blamed the demons for being too powerful, rather than questioning whether beating sick kids made any sense. Some cultures developed elaborate beating tools specifically for demon removal. Specialized whips, blessed clubs, or metal rods, each supposedly more effective at driving out different demon types. Healers trained for years, learning proper beating techniques, teaching apprentices where and how hard to strike for maximum demon expulsion. Obviously, beating sick people only added physical trauma to their existing conditions, often killing patients who might have recovered naturally. Starving to cure disease. Throughout history, healers prescribed extended fasting, believing starvation would purify the body and eliminate illness. Medieval monks promoted fasting as medical treatment, while ancient Greek physicians recommended weeks without food for various conditions. Patients with infections, fevers, digestive problems, and chronic pain were told to stop eating entirely. Healers claimed food fed the disease, so starvation would weaken and eliminate whatever caused the sickness. Some fasting regimens lasted weeks or even months, with patients consuming only water or thin broths. Religious communities especially embraced therapeutic starvation. Monasteries established fasting protocols for sick monks, viewing food restriction as both spiritual cleansing and medical intervention. Saints gained fame for surviving extreme fasts, though many probably died from malnutrition, while their followers celebrated their dedication. Tuberculosis patients received particularly dangerous fasting advice. Doctors in the 1800s and 1900s recommended minimal food intake for consumptive patients, believing their bodies needed to conserve energy rather than digest. In reality, TB patients desperately needed calories to fight infection. Starvation only accelerated their decline. Some cultures still practice extreme fasting for healing. Certain alternative medicine practitioners promote multi-week juice fasts or water-only regimens, claiming they cure cancer, autoimmune diseases, and other serious conditions. Zero scientific evidence supports these claims, and severely ill patients who stop eating often die from malnutrition before their actual disease kills them. Bodies fighting illness need nutrition more than ever. Yet starving the sick seemed perfectly logical to generations of healers who couldn't grasp that food provides energy for healing. Rolling in nettles for joint pain. People suffering from arthritis and joint pain deliberately rolled naked in patches of stinging nettles, enduring intense burning sensations, believing it cured their underlying condition. European folk medicine promoted nettle therapy for centuries, with healers claiming the plant's sting drove out pain-causing spirits. Patients would strip down and throw themselves into nettle beds, rolling back and forth until their entire body erupted in painful welts. Skin turned red and swollen, covered in thousands of tiny stings, releasing histamine and other irritating chemicals. Healers interpreted this reaction as proof the treatment was working. Pain, driving out pain. Some regions developed rituals around nettle rolling. Communities designated specific nettle patches for medical use, maintaining them like public health facilities. Sufferers would visit weekly, enduring agonizing sessions while neighbors watched and offered encouragement. Children learned to view nettle torture as normal healthcare. Interestingly, modern science shows nettle exposure does cause temporary inflammation that might distract from chronic pain or provide mild counter-irritation effects. Some arthritis patients still use nettle extracts in controlled forms, but ancient practitioners took it to extremes, causing severe allergic reactions, skin damage, and occasionally anaphylactic shock in sensitive individuals. Desperate patients with severe arthritis would roll in nettles daily despite minimal improvement. The temporary distraction from their original pain felt like progress, keeping them trapped in a cycle of self-inflicted injury. Some developed permanent skin scarring from repeated nettle exposure, using tobacco smoke enemas. During the 1700s and 1800s, doctors blew tobacco smoke into patients' rectums, claiming it revived drowning victims, cured intestinal problems, and treated various emergencies. Medical kits stationed along rivers included special bellows and tubes specifically designed for administering tobacco smoke enemas. Physicians genuinely believed tobacco smoke contained life-restoring properties. When someone appeared dead from drowning, rescuers would insert a tube into their rectum and pump tobacco smoke inside, thinking the warmth and stimulation would restart vital functions. Lifeguard stations kept tobacco enema equipment as standard emergency gear. Medical journals published detailed instructions for proper smoke enema technique. Doctors recommended specific tobacco types, optimal smoke temperature, and how much to pump into the patient. Some added herbs to the tobacco, creating custom smoke blends for different conditions: hernias, cholera, headaches, colds. Nearly any problem warranted a tobacco smoke enema. Surprisingly, the rectal stimulation sometimes did trigger breathing reflexes in drowning victims. Though the tobacco itself provided no benefit, doctors mistakenly credited tobacco's properties rather than understanding that any rectal stimulation could trigger gasping reflexes. This accidental success kept the practice alive for decades. Patients who survived tobacco enemas often developed severe intestinal irritation, bleeding, and nicotine poisoning. Others died from smoke-induced tissue damage or infections introduced by unsanitary equipment. Yet medical authorities continued promoting the practice, unable to separate coincidental survivals from actual treatment effectiveness. Eventually, doctors realized pumping smoke into people's intestines caused more harm than good, though it took surprisingly long to abandon this absurd procedure. Drinking turpentine as medicine. Well into the early 1900s, people swallowed turpentine, the same toxic solvent used to thin paint and clean brushes. Pharmacies sold medicinal turpentine, and doctors prescribed it for worms, coughs, infections, and digestive problems. Parents gave children spoonfuls of turpentine mixed with sugar to deworm them. Rural families kept turpentine bottles in their medicine cabinets, alongside actual remedies, viewing it as essential healthcare. Some drank it straight, others mixed it with honey, molasses, or milk to mask the harsh chemical taste. Medical texts recommended turpentine for pneumonia, claiming inhaling its vapors cleared lungs. Patients would drink it, rub it on their chests, and breathe steam from turpentine-infused hot water, essentially poisoning themselves multiple ways simultaneously. Doctors prescribed turpentine drops on sugar cubes for children's coughs, teaching kids to associate the dangerous solvent with candy. Turpentine is derived from pine resin and contains compounds toxic to human organs. Drinking it causes kidney damage, chemical burns in the digestive tract, breathing problems, and potential death. Any perceived benefits came from its actual effectiveness against intestinal parasites, though it harmed the patient almost as much as the worms. Folk medicine communities still promote turpentine today. Online forums discuss turpentine cleanses, claiming it cures everything from cancer to autism. People film themselves drinking industrial solvents, genuinely believing 19th century folk wisdom over modern toxicology. Poison control centers still receive calls about turpentine poisoning from people following dangerous internet advice. Eating charcoal to treat poisoning. For thousands of years, healers fed patients charcoal, believing burnt wood absorbed poisons and toxins from the body. Ancient Egyptians, Greek physicians, and traditional medicine practitioners worldwide prescribed charcoal for suspected poisoning, stomach problems, and mysterious illnesses. Families kept burnt wood powder in their homes, ready to mix into drinks at the first sign of poisoning. Healers taught that charcoal's black color literally attracted and trapped bad substances, pulling them from the blood and organs. Some recipes required freshly burnt wood, others used aged charcoal ground into fine powder. Interestingly, activated charcoal actually does work for certain types of poisoning. Its porous structure binds to some toxins in the digestive tract before they absorb into the bloodstream. Ancient healers accidentally discovered a legitimate treatment without understanding the chemistry behind it. But they applied charcoal to everything: ASS, snake bites, infections, plague, evil eye curses. Most conditions had nothing to do with ingested poisons that charcoal could bind to. Patients ate charcoal for fevers, believing it cooled their blood. Others consumed it for depression, thinking it absorbed sad humors. Charcoal itself is relatively harmless, though eating large amounts causes constipation and blocks nutrient absorption. More dangerous was trusting charcoal for serious poisonings, where it couldn't help. Snakebite victims ate charcoal instead of seeking real treatment, dying while their families believed the charcoal simply hadn't worked fast enough. Modern medicine uses pharmaceutical-grade activated charcoal in emergency rooms for specific overdoses, proving ancient healers got something right, even if they vastly overestimated its applications. Using cow dung for burns. Across India, Africa, and rural Europe, people packed fresh cow manure directly onto burns, believing it cooled the injury and prevented scarring. Families kept cow dung readily available, specifically for burn treatment, applying it immediately whenever someone touched hot surfaces or fire. Traditional healers taught that cow dung's moisture content drew heat from burns, while its natural properties prevented infection. Some mixed dung with herbs or oils. Others applied it fresh and warm, straight from the cow. Patients would wear cow dung poultices for days, periodically adding fresh layers as the old ones dried out. Burns already create vulnerable tissue, highly susceptible to infection, smearing feces, filled with bacteria, including E. coli, Clostridium, and countless other pathogens, onto open burn wounds, practically guaranteed severe infections. Many patients developed sepsis, gangrene, or tetanus from contaminated dung entering their damaged skin. Yet communities observed occasional survivals and credited the cow dung rather than recognizing patients survived despite the treatment. Burn victims who healed did so because their immune systems fought off both the burn damage and the fecal bacteria, not because dung helped them. Some regions still practice cow dung burn treatment today. Rural communities without access to modern medicine continue ancient traditions, unaware that clean water and sterile bandages would dramatically improve outcomes. Well-meaning grandmothers pack dung onto children's burns, passing dangerous practices to new generations who trust traditional wisdom over medical science. Cow dung contains some compounds with minor antimicrobial effects, but nowhere near enough to justify introducing feces into burns. Applying hot irons to wounds. Medieval surgeons pressed red-hot metal directly onto infected wounds and surgical sites, using cauterization as their primary method for stopping bleeding and burning out disease. Patients endured unimaginable agony as searing metal destroyed their flesh, creating third-degree burns on top of their original injuries. Battlefield medics heated irons in open flames, then pressed them against stumps of amputated limbs to seal blood vessels. Soldiers would scream and pass out from pain while their flesh sizzled and smoked. Surgeons believed extreme heat killed infection-causing humors while simultaneously stopping hemorrhaging, making cautery seem like efficient, multi-purpose treatment. Physicians used hot irons for internal treatments too. They'd insert heated metal rods into body cavities, burning tissue deep inside patients. Stomach problems? Burn the abdomen. Lung disease? Press hot irons against the chest. Headaches? Sometimes they cauterized the scalp or even temples, believing heat destroyed whatever caused the pain. Cauterization did stop bleeding by destroying blood vessels, but it also destroyed healthy tissue, created massive burn injuries, and caused excruciating pain without anesthesia. Many patients died from shock during the procedure. Others developed severe infections in their burn wounds, dying days or weeks later from complications the treatment caused. Some surgeons specialized in cautery, developing different shaped irons for different body parts. They heated irons to specific temperatures, believing precision heat application separated skilled physicians from amateurs. Medical guilds tested apprentices on proper cauterization techniques, teaching them to inflict maximum burning with supposed medical accuracy. Drinking snake oil for health. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, traveling salesmen sold bottles of snake oil, claiming it cured arthritis, baldness, toothaches, and virtually every condition imaginable. People paid good money for these mysterious elixirs, trusting smooth-talking vendors who promised miracle cures. Snake oil salesmen traveled from town to town with elaborate presentations. They demonstrate on volunteer patients, using actors who pretended arthritis vanished after one dose. Crowds watched these fake recoveries and rushed to buy bottles, convinced they'd witnessed genuine healing. Many products contain no snake ingredients at all, just mineral oil, camphor, or turpentine mixed with coloring agents. Some authentic snake oil came from Chinese water snakes, which actually contain omega-3 fatty acids with minor anti-inflammatory properties. Chinese railroad workers in America used it for joint pain, leading entrepreneurs to copy and mass-produce fake versions with none of the original's limited benefits. Bottles sold for significant portions of workers' weekly wages. Desperate people with chronic pain bought case after case, drinking snake oil daily while their conditions worsened. When it didn't work, salesmen claimed customers hadn't used enough or needed the premium version that cost twice as much. Eventually, investigations exposed most snake oil as worthless fraud. The term snake oil salesman became synonymous with con artists. Yet, the practice established patterns modern scammers still follow, making impossible health claims, using fake testimonials, and targeting desperate people who'll try anything, wearing dead animals for protection. Across countless cultures, people wore entire dead animals or their skins, believing corpses provided supernatural protection against illness, curses, and bad luck. Families draped dead cats, rabbits, or birds around children's necks, treating rotting carcasses as essential safety equipment. European peasants hung dead moles around their necks to prevent toothaches. Some cultures wrapped children in freshly skinned rabbit pelts to guard against fever. Others wore necklaces made from dried bats, convinced these creatures' nocturnal nature warded off nightmares and evil spirits. Dead animals decomposed against wearers' skin, spreading bacteria and parasites. People contracted infections from rotting flesh, pressed against their bodies for days or weeks. Children developed rashes, fevers, and serious illnesses from wearing putrefying animal corpses. Yet parents blamed insufficient spiritual protection rather than questioning whether dead animals belonged on their kids. Some traditions required specific animals killed in specific ways. A cat had to die naturally rather than be killed. Rabbits needed harvesting during full moons. Bats caught at midnight supposedly held stronger protective powers. Communities developed elaborate rules about which dead animals worked best for different threats. Markets sold preserved animal corpses, specifically for wearing. Vendors offered mummified mice, dried snakes, and various birds prepared to last longer as protective amulets. Wealthy buyers paid premium prices for rare species, believing exotic dead animals provided superior protection. Obviously, wearing rotting corpses protected nobody from anything except perhaps social invitations, since wearers must have smelled absolutely horrible while covered in decomposing animals. Using magnets to cure pain. From ancient China through the 1800s, healers placed magnets on patients' bodies, claiming magnetic fields realigned bodily energies and drew out pain-causing substances. Practitioners developed entire medical systems around magnet therapy, treating everything from headaches to paralysis with strategically placed magnetic stones. Franz Mesmer became famous in the 1700s for animal magnetism treatments. He'd wave magnets over patients while they sat in elaborate group sessions, convinced magnetic forces flowed through human bodies and could be manipulated for healing. Wealthy Europeans paid fortunes for Mesmer's magnetic treatments, believing they'd discovered revolutionary medicine. Patients reported feeling sensations during magnet sessions, tingling, warmth, or relaxation. Mesmer interpreted these as proof of magnetic healing, not realizing he'd stumbled onto the placebo effect and power of suggestion. People who expected to feel better often did temporarily, reinforcing belief in magnetic therapy despite zero actual medical benefit. Doctors prescribed magnet belts, magnetic insoles, and even magnetic undergarments. Advertisements promised magnetic corsets cured female hysteria. Salesmen sold magnetic beds, claiming they improved sleep and cured chronic conditions. One company marketed magnetic water, regular water that supposedly gained healing properties after flowing past magnets. Scientific testing eventually proved magnets at these strengths have no biological effects on human tissue, yet magnetic therapy persists today. Companies still sell magnetic bracelets for arthritis, magnetic mattress pads for back pain, and various magnetic devices, making impossible health claims, continuing a scam that's lasted centuries. Drinking liquid metals for strength. Alchemists convince people to swallow liquid antimony, mercury, and other metallic substances, promising these dense materials would fortify bones, strengthen muscles, and extend life. Wealthy patrons paid astronomical sums for metallic elixirs, believing heavier elements made them physically stronger. Antimony became particularly popular in medieval Europe. Physicians prepared antimony wine by steeping metallic antimony in alcohol, creating toxic solutions they prescribed for various ailments. Patients vomited violently after drinking it, which doctors interpreted as the body purging sickness rather than rejecting poison. Some alchemists created perpetual pills, antimony beads, patients would swallow, let pass through their digestive system, retrieve from their waste, clean, and reuse. Families passed these poisonous pills through generations, with each member taking turns swallowing the same antimony bead. Multiple family members would poison themselves with a single, reusable toxic pill. Chinese medicine incorporated liquid cinnabar, mercury sulfide, into longevity treatments. Practitioners heated cinnabar until mercury vaporized, then captured and condensed the liquid metal for patients to drink. Several Chinese emperors died from mercury poisoning after years of consuming cinnabar elixirs, yet the practice continued. Metal poisoning causes tremors, organ failure, neurological damage, and death. Patients grew weaker rather than stronger, but alchemists blamed improper preparation or insufficient doses, rather than admitting liquid metals were fundamentally toxic. Modern toxicology confirms ingesting heavy metals causes irreversible damage, yet these substances' density and permanence made ancient people believe they'd transfer those qualities to human bodies, completely misunderstanding how chemistry actually works. Eating dirt to absorb toxins. Beyond medicinal clay, people ate regular dirt from specific locations, believing earth from sacred sites, battlefields, or ancient ruins possessed purifying powers. Pilgrims collected soil from holy lands, consuming it as spiritual and physical medicine. Christians ate dirt from Jerusalem, convinced land where Jesus walked contained divine healing properties. Muslims consumed earth from Mecca. Hindus ate soil from the Ganges riverbanks. Religious tourism created dirt markets where vendors sold authentic holy soil, often just local dirt repackaged for gullible pilgrims. Battlefield dirt became valuable after famous victories. Soldiers collected earth, soaked with blood from victorious battles, believing it transferred warrior strength and courage. Families bought dirt from Waterloo, Gettysburg, and other historic sites, feeding it to sick relatives or mixing it into drinks for vigor. Grave dirt held special significance. People ate soil from saints' burial sites or famous heroes' graves, thinking the deceased's essence remained in surrounding earth. Some traditions required eating dirt from specific graves at midnight under full moons, adding a cult ritual to an already questionable practice. Dirt contains parasites, bacteria, fungi, and countless pathogens. Eating soil from battlefields meant consuming decomposition products from corpses. Grave dirt carried disease from buried bodies. Holy Land soil had no more healing properties than any random handful of earth. Just higher prices and more parasites from thousands of pilgrims contaminating the same locations. Desperate sick people ate expensive dirt from faraway places, poisoning themselves while believing they'd purchased miraculous cures. Dirt vendors became wealthy, selling repackaged local soil to trusting believers, bathing in milk for beauty. Cleopatra allegedly bathed in donkey milk, and wealthy women throughout history copied her, filling tubs with hundreds of gallons of milk, believing it preserved youth and enhanced beauty. Roman empresses, European nobles, and Asian aristocrats all practiced milk bathing as essential skincare. Servants would milk dozens of animals to fill a single bath. Donkey milk was most prized, requiring herds of donkeys and hours of milking. Cow milk served as a cheaper alternative for less wealthy families. Some recipes mixed milk with honey, rose petals, or essential oils, creating elaborate beauty formulas that wasted enormous food resources. Milk does contain lactic acid, which provides mild exfoliation, giving ancient bathers a kernel of truth to build their extravagant practice around. But the tiny amount absorbed through brief soaking provided minimal benefit compared to simply washing with soap and water. More problematic was the waste. Families poured hundreds of gallons of drinkable milk into baths while poor people starved. During famines, wealthy women still bathed in milk, treating beauty routines as more important than feeding hungry citizens. Servants collected milk specifically for bathing, never considering drinking it themselves. Milk baths also created hygiene problems. Milk spoils quickly, especially when warmed to body temperature. Bathers soaked in milk that started curdling mid-bath, growing bacteria that could cause skin infections. Tubs had to be thoroughly cleaned after each milk bath to prevent rancid residue. Modern science confirms milk baths provide minimal skincare benefits not worth their cost, yet luxury spas still offer milk bath treatments, capitalizing on ancient myths about Cleopatra's beauty secrets. Using crocodile dung for birth control. Ancient Egyptian women inserted crocodile dung into their bodies, believing it prevented pregnancy through magical and physical barriers. Medical papyri from 1850 BC contain detailed recipes, mixing crocodile feces with honey or fermented dough for contraceptive pessaries. Physicians taught that crocodile dung's acidic properties killed sperm while creating a physical blockage. Women would fashion the mixture into shapes, insert them, and hope for the best. Some formulas required fresh dung. Others specified aged, dried excrement ground into powder. Beyond crocodiles, various cultures used elephant dung, sheep feces, or other animal waste as contraceptives. Greek physicians prescribed different animal dungs for different women based on their humoral constitution. Roman women paid high prices for imported exotic animal feces, believing rarer species provided better pregnancy prevention. Feces contains countless bacteria harmful to delicate vaginal tissue. Women developed severe infections, pelvic inflammatory disease, and sometimes died from sepsis caused by their contraception. Others became pregnant anyway. Discovering fecal barriers provided zero actual birth control while causing serious health problems. Interestingly, some effectiveness may have occurred accidentally. Acidic compounds in decomposing feces could theoretically affect sperm motility slightly, though not reliably enough to prevent pregnancy. Any contraceptive effect was completely outweighed by infection risks and tissue damage. Women used these dangerous methods for centuries, suffering infections and unwanted pregnancies, while physicians kept prescribing fecal pessaries. Only when modern contraception emerged did women finally stop inserting animal waste into their bodies, though it took surprisingly long to abandon such an obviously terrible practice. Drinking animal blood for vigor. Warriors across ancient cultures drank fresh animal blood immediately after kills, believing it transferred the creature's strength, speed, and life force directly into their bodies. Hunters developed rituals around blood consumption, treating it as essential practice for maintaining physical prowess. Maasai warriors in Africa mixed cattle blood with milk as a regular dietary staple, drinking it daily for strength and endurance. Mongol armies would cut their horses' veins during long campaigns, drinking small amounts of blood to sustain themselves when food was scarce. Viking berserkers allegedly consumed animal blood before battles, thinking it made them more ferocious. Blood drinking spread beyond warriors. Sick people consumed blood, hoping to cure weakness or anemia. Athletes drank it for competitive advantage. Parents gave children animal blood, believing it promoted growth and health. Markets sold fresh blood from various animals, with vendors claiming different species provided different benefits. Raw blood carries serious disease risks. Drinking it can transmit anthrax, brucellosis, tuberculosis, and countless parasites from infected animals. Many blood drinkers developed severe illnesses or died from pathogens they consumed, along with the blood. Blood does contain iron and protein, giving practitioners a tiny kernel of truth to justify their practice. But cooking meat provides the same nutrients without disease transmission risks. Any strength gains came from overall protein intake, not mystical blood properties. Some cultures still practice ceremonial blood drinking today, though modern health awareness has reduced the tradition. Athletes no longer gulp raw blood thinking it enhances performance. Well, most don't anyway. Wearing human bones as jewelry. Across Tibet, Europe, and various tribal cultures, people fashioned jewelry from human skeletal remains, wearing skulls, finger bones, and teeth as decorative accessories with spiritual significance. Monks carved prayer beads from human vertebrae. Warriors wore enemy bones as victory trophies. Families preserved ancestor bones in wearable forms. Tibetan Buddhist practitioners created elaborate ornaments from bones of deceased monks and lamas. Skull cups for ritual drinks, bone trumpets for ceremonies, necklaces strung with human finger bones. Practitioners believed using bones from spiritually advanced individuals helped their own meditation and enlightenment. European ossuaries provided bones for jewelry during medieval times. Craftsmen carved intricate designs into human femurs and skulls. Wealthy patrons commissioned jewelry boxes, crosses, and decorative items made entirely from human remains. Churches displayed bones of saints in ornate reliquaries that believers touched for blessings. Headhunting cultures wore shrunken heads and enemy skull fragments as jewelry, displaying their warrior prowess. Some tribes believed wearing bones of defeated enemies prevented their spirits from seeking revenge. Others thought it absorbed the victim's strength and courage. Beyond spiritual reasons, some wore human bone jewelry simply as macabre fashion. Victorian mourning jewelry incorporated hair and occasionally bone fragments from deceased loved ones. People carried pieces of dead relatives with them everywhere, finding comfort in physical remains. Modern ethics reject using human remains as accessories, though bone jewelry from questionable sources still appears in underground markets. Most cultures now consider wearing human bones disrespectful, but for centuries, it was completely normal across multiple civilizations. Burning incense to cure plague. During medieval plague outbreaks, authorities ordered citizens to burn incense constantly in their homes, believing aromatic smoke would purify air and prevent disease transmission. Cities mandated public incense burning in streets, creating thick smoke that hung over entire communities. Physicians walked through plague wards carrying censers, swinging incense burners while believing fragrant smoke protected them from infection. Wealthy families burned expensive imported incense day and night, consuming fortunes on frankincense, myrrh, and exotic resins. Poor families burned cheaper herbs and wood, filling their cramped homes with choking smoke. Medical theory taught that bad smells caused plague, so good smells must prevent it. Doctors prescribed specific incense blends for different stages of infection. Rose incense for prevention, cedar for early symptoms, lavender mixed with juniper for active cases. None of it worked. Constant smoke inhalation damaged lungs and respiratory systems. Children and elderly people suffered especially, developing breathing problems from living in perpetually smoke-filled rooms. Some died from smoke-related complications, while families believed they were following proper plague prevention protocols. Cities organized mass incense burning ceremonies, where entire populations gathered in public squares, creating enormous bonfires of aromatic woods and resins. These gatherings actually helped spread plague by bringing infected and healthy people together in close proximity, exactly the opposite of what they needed. Plague spreads through flea bites and respiratory droplets, not bad smells. Incense provided zero protection, while creating new health hazards and wasting resources communities needed for actual medical care. Using salt to ward off evil. From ancient Rome through modern times, people scattered salt around homes, sprinkled it over thresholds, and carried it in pouches, convinced it created barriers against evil spirits, demons, and curses. Salt's preservation properties made ancient cultures believe it could preserve spiritual safety as effectively as it preserved meat. Romans threw salt over their shoulders after spilling it, believing spilled salt invited bad luck unless the ritual counteracted it. Medieval Europeans drew salt circles around sick people's beds to keep demons from stealing souls. Sailors never sailed without salt pouches, thinking it protected against sea monsters and storms. Exorcists used salt in demon-banishing rituals. They'd sprinkle blessed salt around possessed individuals, draw salt lines across doorways, and mix salt into holy water for extra protective power. Communities organized salt-spreading ceremonies during plague outbreaks, treating it as medical intervention rather than superstition. Salt's actual value as a scarce, expensive preservative got confused with supernatural properties. Because salt prevented food from rotting, people reasoned it must prevent spiritual corruption too. Logic leaps like this created entire belief systems around mundane household items. Some cultures required specific salt types. Sea salt was most powerful. Rock salt worked for minor protections. Blessed salt that priests prayed over commanded premium prices. Families spent significant portions of their income on protective salt, believing it was as essential as food. Obviously, salt provides zero protection against imaginary evil forces. But try telling that to someone who's lived their entire life watching neighbors scatter salt and believing it keeps them safe from supernatural threats. Killing twins at birth. Certain African and Asian cultures routinely killed twin babies, believing multiple births signaled evil omens, supernatural punishment, or demonic possession. Communities forced mothers to choose which infant lived, or simply killed both to eliminate the curse. West African tribes considered twins unnatural and dangerous. Mothers who delivered twins faced accusations of witchcraft or adultery with evil spirits. Villages would immediately kill the newborns, sometimes executing the mother as well. Families who tried protecting twin babies faced exile or death themselves. The community wouldn't tolerate keeping cursed children alive. Some traditions required specific killing methods. Twins might be left in the forest for wild animals, drowned in rivers, or buried alive. Shamans performed rituals during the killings, believing proper ceremonies prevented the evil from returning in future births. Igbo communities in Nigeria practiced twin infanticide for centuries. Parents who secretly kept twins had to hide them completely, never letting them appear in public together. Twin survivors grew up separated, each pretending to be an only child to avoid community violence. Why did these beliefs emerge? Ancient people couldn't explain why some births produced multiples. Unable to understand genetics, they created supernatural explanations that labeled twins as cursed or evil. These beliefs became so entrenched that questioning them meant challenging fundamental cultural worldviews. Missionaries and colonial governments eventually stopped most twin killings through legal enforcement and education. But some remote communities continued the practice into the 20th century, and scattered incidents still occur today where ancient superstitions persist. Burying treasure with corpses. Across Egypt, China, Vikings' territories, and countless other cultures, families buried enormous wealth with deceased relatives, placing gold, jewelry, weapons, and valuables in graves for the dead to use in the afterlife. Communities impoverished themselves, filling tombs with treasure they'd never see again. Egyptian pharaohs took this to extremes. Tutankhamun's tomb contained 5,000 objects, including solid gold coffins, chariots, furniture, and enough wealth to feed thousands. While living citizens starved, kingdoms diverted resources to furnish elaborate tombs. Craftsmen spent years creating burial goods rather than items for the living. Chinese emperors built underground palaces filled with jade, gold, and priceless artifacts. Some tombs contained more wealth than entire provinces possessed. The famous terracotta army, I have thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, represented just one emperor's burial complex. Resources that could have improved irrigation, built roads, or fed people instead went underground forever. Viking warriors were buried with ships, weapons, slaves, and treasure. Noble families bankrupted themselves, providing proper burial goods, believing inadequate offerings doomed their loved ones to poverty in Valhalla. Communities competed over who could afford the most impressive burials, treating corpses better than they treated living poor people. Grave robbing became inevitable. Thieves knew exactly where concentrated wealth sat waiting. Almost every ancient tomb was robbed within years of burial. Families impoverished themselves, filling graves that would be looted anyway, losing the wealth to thieves instead of using it to help their own survival. Wearing iron to repel fairies. Celtic communities wore iron jewelry, carried iron nails, and placed horseshoes above doors, genuinely believing iron repelled fairies who would otherwise steal children, curse crops, or cause mischief. Families invested in iron protective items as seriously as modern people buy home security systems. Folklore taught that fairies couldn't touch iron without burning. Parents tied iron bracelets on babies' wrists to prevent fairy kidnapping. Farmers hammered iron stakes into fields, believing it kept malicious spirits from ruining harvests. Travelers carried iron knives specifically for fairy protection, not self-defense against humans. Communities developed elaborate iron protection rituals. Blacksmiths blessed iron items with special incantations. People wore iron jewelry even while sleeping, afraid fairies might replace them with changelings if they removed protection for even one night. Some households lined doorways with iron strips to create barriers fairies couldn't cross. When children got sick or died, parents blamed themselves for inadequate iron protection rather than understanding disease or medical problems. Families bankrupted themselves, buying more iron charms after tragedies, convinced better fairy defenses would prevent future losses. Ironworkers gained special social status as fairy protection specialists. Blacksmiths charged premium prices for items blessed against supernatural threats. Markets sold iron trinkets specifically marketed for fairy repulsion. Early examples of exploiting superstition for profit. Fairies don't exist, so iron's protective properties were completely imaginary. But entire communities structured their lives around avoiding fairy wrath, wasting resources and energy on supernatural threats that posed zero actual danger compared to real problems like disease, famine, and violence. Using spit to heal. Wounds. Throughout history and across cultures, people applied saliva directly to cuts, burns, and infections, believing human spit possessed healing properties. Mothers licked their children's wounds. Healers spit on injuries during treatment rituals. Communities considered saliva application as essential first aid. Ancient Romans believed saliva from fasting individuals had extra healing power. They'd spit on wounds first thing in the morning before eating, thinking empty stomach saliva was most potent. Some cultures required spitting 3 times while reciting incantations. Others prescribed saliva from specific people. Healers, virgins, or firstborn children supposedly produced more effective spit. Interestingly, saliva does contain compounds with mild antimicrobial properties. Enzymes like lysozyme can fight some bacteria. Animals instinctively lick their wounds for this reason. Ancient humans weren't completely wrong about saliva having some protective effects, but they vastly overestimated those benefits while ignoring serious risks. Human mouths contain hundreds of bacterial species. Applying spit to open wounds introduces oral bacteria directly into vulnerable tissue. Many patients developed severe infections from contaminated saliva, staph, strep, and other pathogens spreading from someone's mouth into their injury. Certain healers specialized in therapeutic spitting. They'd charge fees to spit on wounds, claiming their saliva was blessed or magically enhanced. Desperate sick people paid for professional spitters to drool on their infections, hoping mystical saliva would cure what medicine couldn't. Modern medicine recognizes saliva's minor benefits, but strongly discourages applying it to wounds. The infection risks far outweigh any antimicrobial advantages, though people still instinctively lick minor cuts without thinking about it. Drinking seawater as cure. Shipwreck survivors and desperate sailors drank seawater, believing it would hydrate them and provide essential minerals. Some physicians even prescribed seawater for various illnesses, claiming ocean water contained healing properties that fresh water lacked. Ancient Greek doctors recommended seawater for digestive problems and skin conditions. Roman physicians prescribed drinking diluted seawater for constipation. Coastal communities developed folk remedies involving seawater consumption, treating it as medicine rather than poison. Reality hits brutally fast when drinking seawater. High salt content pulls water from your cells through osmosis, making you more dehydrated than before. Kidneys try processing the excess salt by producing more urine, using up your body's remaining water stores. Drinking seawater to quench thirst actually accelerates dehydration and death. Sailors who drank seawater during emergencies died faster than those who simply endured thirst. They'd experience hallucinations, kidney failure, seizures, and death within days. Yet desperate people kept trying it. Seeing water all around them and unable to resist drinking, despite knowing the risks. Some healers created seawater cures by boiling and concentrating it into thick brines. They'd sell these super salty solutions as concentrated healing elixirs. Patients drinking these preparations experienced even worse salt poisoning than consuming plain seawater. Modern desalination technology finally made seawater safely drinkable by removing salt. But for thousands of years, people surrounded by ocean water died of thirst because they couldn't resist drinking what seemed like an obvious solution, not understanding why liquid that looked drinkable actually killed them faster. Eating raw meat for strength. Warriors across ancient cultures consumed raw flesh immediately after killing animals, believing uncooked meat transferred maximum strength and vitality. Mongol horsemen ate raw horse meat during campaigns. Inuit hunters consumed raw seal immediately after the kill. European berserkers allegedly devoured raw bear meat before battles. People reasoned that cooking destroyed the animal's life force. Fire altered meat's essence, weakening its power-giving properties. Only consuming flesh still warm from death supposedly provided full strength transfer. Some traditions required eating specific organs raw: hearts for courage, livers for endurance, brains for wisdom. Athletes in ancient Greece ate raw meat before competitions. Gladiators consumed it, believing it made them fiercer fighters. Parents fed children raw meat, hoping to build strength and resilience. Communities developed preferences for specific animals. Raw lion meat for bravery, raw bull meat for virility, raw wolf meat for cunning. Raw meat carries devastating parasites and pathogens: tapeworms, roundworms, trichinosis, E. coli, salmonella. Countless organisms thrive in uncooked flesh. People who regularly ate raw meat suffered from parasitic infections that caused malnutrition, organ damage, and sometimes death. Their strength-seeking diet literally weakened them. Some traditions continue today. Steak tartare and carpaccio represent culinary evolution of raw meat eating, though modern versions use carefully sourced, inspected meat with lower contamination risks. But ancient raw meat eaters had no food safety standards. They simply killed animals and immediately consumed whatever flesh they wanted, parasites and all. Cooking meat kills dangerous organisms while preserving nutritional value. Ancient people got it exactly backward, using honey for embalming. Ancient Egyptians, Assyrians, and other cultures preserved corpses in honey, filling body cavities and coating entire bodies with the sweet substance. Wealthy families purchased enormous quantities of honey to ensure proper preservation of their deceased relatives. Alexander the Great's body was allegedly transported from Babylon to Alexandria preserved in a golden coffin filled with honey. Elite families followed this example, treating honey preservation as the highest honor for deceased loved ones. Embalmers removed organs, packed cavities with honey-soaked linen, then submerged entire bodies in honey jars. Honey does have natural preservative properties. Its low moisture content and acidic pH prevent bacterial growth. Bodies preserved in honey could remain intact for years, leading ancient people to correctly identify honey's preservative power while taking it to bizarre extremes. But this created ethical problems. Communities consumed honey from the same sources used for embalming. Beekeeper families sometimes recycled honey from old preservation jars back into food supplies. People unknowingly ate honey that had been used to preserve corpses. Discovering this practice was considered normal resource management rather than horrifying contamination. Some regions developed mellified man practices. Elderly individuals would consume only honey for months before death, then be preserved in honey after dying. Practitioners believed this created medicinal honey with enhanced healing properties. Decades later, the preserved body would be disinterred and pieces sold as medicine. Modern preservation uses formaldehyde and other chemicals. Nobody embalms bodies in food products anymore, mostly because we recognize honey should be for eating, not corpse storage. Wearing certain colors to avoid death. Medieval Europeans refused to wear specific color combinations, believing mismatched hues attracted the plague or invited premature death. Communities developed elaborate color rules, dictating which combinations were safe versus deadly. Green and yellow together was considered a death sentence. People saw plague victims wearing these colors and concluded the combination caused disease rather than coincidence. Families burned clothing containing forbidden color pairings. Tailors refused creating garments in dangerous combinations, even when customers requested them. During plague outbreaks, authorities mandated specific clothing colors. Some cities required everyone to wear red, believing it repelled disease. Others insisted on white for purity. Communities that chose wrong colors suffered the same plague death rates as everywhere else, but survivors credited their color choices for living through the outbreak. Superstitions varied by region. Purple with black invited death in some areas but provided protection in others. Blue was safe everywhere except when worn on Tuesdays. Wedding guests avoided wearing certain colors that might curse the marriage with early widowhood. Fashion became dangerous. People stopped wearing favorite clothes because superstition deemed the colors unlucky. Merchants couldn't sell fabrics in forbidden combinations. Entire dye industries shifted production based on which colors current plague theories considered safe. Obviously, clothing color has zero effect on disease transmission. Plague spreads through flea bites and respiratory droplets, completely ignoring what colors you're wearing. But ancient people desperately wanted control over death, so they created rules about anything that seemed to correlate with survival, including meaningless color superstitions. Killing messengers with bad news. Ancient rulers routinely executed messengers who delivered unwanted information, believing killing the bearer would somehow reverse the bad news or prevent its effects. Persian kings, Chinese emperors, and countless other leaders made messenger execution standard practice. Soldiers volunteered to deliver victory reports, but hid when defeats needed announcing. Nobody wanted the job of telling a king his army lost, his city burned, or his family members died. Messengers drew lots to decide who'd risk execution delivering terrible news, knowing the information receiver might kill them simply for speaking unwelcome truths. Some rulers refined the practice. They'd kill messengers slowly as punishment for bringing disasters, as if torturing the news carrier changed reality. Others would execute entire messenger groups when one delivered bad news, ensuring nobody wanted to report honestly about military defeats or natural disasters. Messengers developed strategies for survival. They'd send advanced scouts to gauge the ruler's mood. Some delivered bad news, mixed with trivial good news, hoping to soften the blow. Others ran away immediately after speaking, gambling they could escape before guards caught them. This created terrible information systems. Advisors hesitated reporting problems. Military defeats went unreported until armies arrived at palace gates. Disease outbreaks remained secret until plague decimated cities. Leaders made catastrophically bad decisions because nobody dared tell them the truth. Eventually, rulers realized killing messengers meant never learning about actual problems until too late. But the practice took centuries to fade. Countless messengers died simply for accurately reporting reality their leaders didn't want to hear. Using human fat as ointment. Medieval executioners collected fat from executed criminals, selling it as healing ointment to desperate patients. Known as corpse medicine, human fat was rendered into salves that supposedly cured arthritis, wounds, and various skin conditions. Executioners had exclusive access to fresh corpses, creating a profitable side business. They'd harvest fat immediately after executions, render it like cooking lard, then sell jars to apothecaries and healers. Physicians prescribed human fat ointments for joint pain, believing the warmth of living human tissue transferred healing properties, even after death. Patients rubbed dead criminals' fat onto their bodies daily, convinced it provided relief. Some recipes mixed human fat with herbs or oils. Others used it pure, straight from rendered corpse tissue. Medical texts described proper human fat preparation methods, treating this practice as legitimate medicine rather than horrifying desecration. Gladiator fat commanded premium prices. Romans believed fat from strong warriors provided better healing than fat from weak criminals. Executioners charged more for fat from young, healthy, executed prisoners versus old or sick ones. Buyers paid based on the corpse's perceived vitality. Beyond medical use, some believed human fat had magical properties. Thieves rubbed it on their hands, thinking it made them invisible or gave them supernatural lockpicking abilities. Witches allegedly used human fat in curse rituals, though most witch fat was probably just animal lard sold by con artists. Obviously, human fat has no special healing properties. It's chemically similar to animal fat, with the same basic composition. Patients literally rubbed dead people's body fat on themselves while believing it was medicine. Drinking from skull cups for power. Warriors across Viking, Tibetan, and various tribal cultures drank from human skull cups, believing consuming beverages from defeated enemies' craniums transferred their strength and prevented their spirits from seeking revenge. Skilled craftsmen converted skulls into decorated drinking vessels that owners treasured as prized possessions. Vikings supposedly turned enemy leaders' skulls into mead cups, though archaeological evidence is limited. Tibetan monks created ritual skull cups from deceased lamas' craniums, using them in sacred ceremonies. Some cultures lined skulls with gold or silver, transforming them into elaborate chalices for special occasions. Skull cups served multiple purposes. Warriors displayed them as trophies proving their victories. Leaders used them during feasts to intimidate guests and demonstrate power. Religious practitioners employed them in rituals, believing the original owner's spiritual essence remained in the bone. Creating skull cups required skill. Craftsmen had to carefully cut away the skull cap, smooth the edges, and sometimes add decorative elements or metal linings. Families passed down particularly impressive skull cups through generations. Grandchildren drinking from skulls their grandfathers collected decades earlier. Beyond enemies, some cultures made skull cups from revered ancestors. Drinking from a wise elder's skull supposedly transferred their knowledge. Using a brave warrior's skull in ceremonies honored their memory while capturing their courage for living descendants. Modern ethics strongly oppose using human remains as dishware. Museums display historical skull cups as cultural artifacts, but creating new ones violates laws and moral standards worldwide. Still, the practice persisted for millennia across distant cultures that independently decided skulls made appropriate drinking vessels. Eating placenta for health. After childbirth, some cultures consumed the placenta, believing it restored the mother's strength, improved milk production, and prevented postpartum depression. Chinese medicine incorporated placenta into various remedies, while certain tribes included it in ceremonial meals following births. Traditional practices involved cooking placenta like any other organ meat. Families would stir-fry it with vegetables, make soup, or dry it into powder for later consumption. Some recipes called for the mother to eat her own placenta. Others distributed it among family members, treating it as a strength-sharing ritual. Modern advocates claim placenta consumption provides hormones, iron, and nutrients depleted during pregnancy. Some hospitals now allow mothers to take placentas home. Companies encapsulate dried placenta into pills, creating a contemporary version of ancient practice. Scientific evidence remains mixed. Placenta does contain nutrients and hormones, but so does regular meat without the infection risks. Raw or undercooked placenta can harbor bacteria from the birth process. Several cases of newborn infections traced back to mothers consuming contaminated placenta, then transmitting bacteria through breastfeeding. Animals commonly eat their placentas after birth, leading people to assume it must be beneficial. But animals do this primarily to hide evidence of vulnerable newborns from predators, not for nutritional reasons. Humans misinterpreted animal behavior as instinctive health wisdom. Unlike most practices on this list, placenta consumption continues growing in popularity. Celebrity endorsements and social media promote it as natural postpartum care, though rigorous medical studies show minimal benefits that don't outweigh potential risks. Wearing teeth as lucky charms. People across cultures wore animal and human teeth as protective amulets, believing teeth held the creature's essence and provided supernatural benefits. Necklaces strung with bear teeth, shark teeth, enemy teeth, and baby teeth served as jewelry that supposedly granted protection and good fortune. Children's first lost teeth became family heirlooms. Parents would drill holes through baby teeth and string them into bracelets their kids wore throughout life. Some cultures believed wearing your own baby teeth prevented adult teeth from falling out, as if keeping the originals nearby somehow protected their replacements. Warriors wore enemy teeth as victory trophies and power sources. Collecting teeth from defeated opponents supposedly absorbed their strength while preventing their spirits from seeking revenge. Some necklaces contained dozens of human teeth from different victims, horrifying displays that owners wore proudly. Shark teeth were especially prized. Coastal communities believed wearing shark teeth made swimmers faster and protected against drowning. Fishermen wore them hoping to catch more fish. Pregnant women wore them, believing it ensured healthy babies. Wisdom teeth held special significance. Healers claimed keeping extracted wisdom teeth in your pocket enhanced intelligence and decision-making. Some ground wisdom teeth into powder for medicine, thinking it transferred the tooth's wisdom to whoever consumed it. Modern people still wear tooth jewelry, though usually ethically sourced animal teeth, not human ones. Shark tooth necklaces remain popular beach souvenirs, but ancient tooth wearing went far beyond fashion. People genuinely believed teeth provided magical protection. not just looked interesting. Using fingernail clippings in spells. Witches, shamans, and folk healers collected fingernail clippings, using them in curses, love potions, and protective spells. People guarded their nail clippings carefully, burning or burying them to prevent enemies from using them in harmful magic. Magical practitioners taught that fingernails contained a person's essence. Possessing someone's nail clippings gave you power over them. Love spells required the target's nails mixed into potions. Curse rituals burned nail clippings while chanting the victim's name. Healing ceremonies incorporated the patient's nails into protective amulets. Communities developed elaborate nail disposal rituals. Some buried clippings at crossroads, others threw them into running water. Many burned them immediately after cutting, watching carefully to ensure complete destruction. Leaving nail clippings where enemies could find them was considered dangerously careless. Barbers and personal servants had access to clients' nail clippings, making them suspected witches or potential blackmailers. Wealthy people sometimes paid servants extra to guarantee proper disposal of their nail and hair clippings. Paranoid nobles supervised their own grooming, refusing to let anyone else handle their bodily waste. Witch trials included accusations of nail theft. Prosecutors claimed witches snuck into homes, stealing nail clippings to use in curses, causing the family's subsequent illnesses or misfortunes. Defendants had no way to prove they didn't possess someone's fingernails, making these accusations almost impossible to defend against. Obviously, fingernail clippings have zero magical properties. They're just keratin protein, chemically identical, regardless of whose body produced them. But belief in nail magic was so widespread that people structured their grooming habits around preventing supernatural theft. Burning hair to curse enemies. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, people burned stolen hair while reciting curses, believing it caused the original owner to suffer illness, madness, or death. Hair from enemies became powerful curse ingredients that witches and folk practitioners sought actively. Obtaining someone's hair meant power over them. Servants saved hair from brushes. Barbers sold client hair to curse practitioners. Jealous rivals collected strands from shared spaces. Once you possessed someone's hair, you could theoretically control their fate through magical rituals. Curse ceremonies varied, but typically involved burning hair while speaking the victim's name and desired harm. Some added herbs or oils to intensify effects. Others buried burned hair at the victim's doorstep or near their property. Practitioners believed smoke from burning hair carried curses directly to the target. Communities lived in constant fear of hair theft. People never left hair visible after grooming. Families burned all hair immediately or buried it in secret locations. Some kept their hair in locked boxes, treating it like valuable property rather than waste material. Protection magic developed around hair vulnerability. Amulets supposedly blocked hair-based curses. Counterspells reversed damage if you discovered someone cursed you through your hair. Healers specialized in reading burned hair residue to identify who cast curses and how to break them. Obviously, burning someone's hair doesn't magically harm them. Hair is dead keratin protein. Destroying it affects nothing except the hair itself. But belief in hair magic was so powerful that people structured entire aspects of their lives around protecting and controlling hair remnants, treating grooming waste as dangerous supernatural weapons, drinking bathwater of saints. Medieval pilgrims collected and drank bathwater from holy figures, believing water that touched saints' bodies absorbed divine healing properties. Churches bottled and sold saint bathwater to desperate believers seeking miracles. After saints bathed, attendants would carefully collect the water rather than discarding it. They'd bottle it in small vials, sometimes adding wax seals to prove authenticity. Pilgrims traveled enormous distances to obtain these precious bottles, paying substantial sums for liquid that had merely touched a holy person's skin. Sick people drank saint bathwater, hoping to cure diseases. Barren women consumed it, believing it granted fertility. Soldiers drank it before battles for divine protection. Families kept saint bathwater bottles as emergency medicine, administering it during serious illnesses when normal remedies failed. Market for fake saint bathwater exploded. Con artists filled bottles with regular water, claimed it came from famous saints, and sold it to gullible pilgrims. No way existed to verify authenticity. Water looks like water regardless of its source. Buyers paid premium prices for ordinary water while believing they'd purchased miracle medicine. Some saints were still living, making bathwater collection easier but stranger. Famous holy figures had their bathwater systematically harvested and sold. Imagine knowing strangers drink your used bathwater as medicine, yet accepting it as normal religious practice. Obviously, bathwater contains soap residue, skin cells, dirt, and whatever else washed off during bathing. Drinking anyone's bathwater provides zero health benefits and potentially exposes you to their skin bacteria. But desperate believers consumed it anyway, convinced holiness transferred through water, using ground horn as aphrodisiac. For centuries, people consumed powdered rhinoceros horn, deer antlers, and other animal horns, believing they enhanced virility and sexual performance. Traditional Chinese medicine promoted horn powder as potent aphrodisiacs, creating markets that drove species toward extinction. Practitioners reasoned that horn's hard, protruding shape symbolized male potency, therefore consuming it must transfer those qualities. Rhino horn commanded astronomical prices, with desperate buyers paying more per ounce than gold. Wealthy men consumed it regularly, convinced it maintained their sexual prowess into old age. Horn is pure keratin, the same protein in human fingernails and hair. Eating ground rhino horn provides identical nutritional value to chewing your own fingernails. Zero aphrodisiac properties exist, yet belief was so strong that entire industries developed around harvesting, processing, and selling horn powder. Poachers slaughtered rhinos solely for their horns, leaving carcasses to rot. Populations crashed as demand skyrocketed. Multiple rhino species went extinct or near extinct because men believed powdered horn improved sexual function. Similar devastation hit deer, narwhals, and other horned species. Sellers mixed real horn with cheaper substitutes, ground bone, hooves, or plain chalk. Buyers couldn't tell the difference once ground into powder. Most rhino horn consumed historically was probably fake, meaning men paid fortunes for mystery powder, while real rhinos died anyway to supply the market. Modern conservation efforts fight ongoing demand. Despite scientific proof that horn has no medicinal value, black markets persist. Rhinos still face poaching because ancient superstitions refuse to die, even when species extinction hangs in the balance. Eating lizards to cure illness. Traditional healers prescribed eating specific lizards, believing different species cured different diseases. Chinese medicine used gecko lizards for respiratory problems. European folk remedies recommended consuming various reptiles for skin conditions and weakness. Practitioners developed detailed lizard pharmacology, green lizards for liver problems, brown ones for digestive issues, larger species for serious conditions. Patients would eat lizards whole, ground into powder, or dried and steeped as tea. Some recipes required live lizards, swallowed intact. Gecko wine became popular in Asian medicine. Healers would drown geckos in rice wine, let them steep for weeks, then sell the infused alcohol as cure-all tonic. Multiple geckos per bottle supposedly increased potency. Customers drank lizard wine, believing it strengthened lungs, enhanced vitality, and extended life. Beyond consumption, some practices involved wearing dried lizards as amulets or rubbing lizard powder on affected areas. Lizard tail regeneration inspired beliefs that lizards possessed healing powers, transferable to humans through consumption or contact. Lizards contain protein and some nutrients, but nothing special beyond what other meat provides. Eating them offers no medicinal advantages over chicken or fish. Worse, wild-caught reptiles often carry salmonella and parasites, making lizard consumption potentially dangerous. Yet the practice continues in some regions. Traditional medicine shops still sell dried lizards and lizard-based remedies. Conservation concerns arise as certain lizard species face over-harvesting for supposed medicinal value. Another case of animals suffering for ineffective folk remedies based on ancient misunderstandings of biology. Wearing amber to prevent disease. Throughout Europe and Asia, people wore amber jewelry, believing fossilized tree resin created protective barriers against illness, evil spirits, and bad luck. Baltic amber became particularly prized, with traders building entire economies around exporting medicinal amber across continents. Ancient Greeks called amber electron, and believed it possessed electrical properties after observing how rubbing amber generated static. They concluded this mysterious energy repelled disease. Medieval Europeans wore amber necklaces during plague outbreaks, convinced it purified surrounding air and protected wearers from infection. Mothers placed amber teething necklaces on babies, believing it eased pain and prevented illness. Children wore amber from infancy through adulthood, never removing it for fear of losing protection. Families invested significant wealth in quality amber pieces, treating them as essential health equipment rather than optional jewelry. Physicians prescribed amber for various conditions. Wearing it near affected areas supposedly drew out disease. Grinding amber into powder and consuming it allegedly cured internal problems. Burning amber and inhaling smoke treated respiratory issues. Entire medical systems developed around amber's imaginary healing properties. Amber does contain succinic acid with mild analgesic properties, giving ancient practitioners a tiny kernel of truth to build their beliefs around. But wearing amber jewelry doesn't transfer those compounds into your body in therapeutic amounts. Any benefits were purely placebo effects. Modern alternative medicine still promotes amber, especially for teething babies, despite zero scientific evidence supporting these claims, and significant choking hazards from necklaces on infants. Ancient amber superstitions persist, repackaged as natural wellness products for contemporary consumers, using moonlight to treat madness. Across cultures, healers exposed mentally ill patients to moonlight, believing lunar rays either caused or cured insanity, depending on the treatment method. Asylums built moon rooms with skylights where patients spent nights bathing in moonbeams as therapy. Ancient Greeks and Romans associated the moon with madness, coining lunacy from lunar. Yet they also believed controlled moonlight exposure could rebalance disturbed minds. Physicians developed elaborate moon therapy protocols, exposing patients during specific lunar phases, while avoiding others thought to worsen symptoms. Full moon nights required restraining mentally ill patients, as healers believed lunar peak intensified madness. New moons supposedly offered healing windows. Some treatments involved patients sleeping outdoors during waning moons to drain madness as the moon diminished. Medieval asylums positioned certain rooms to maximize or minimize moonlight based on theories about beneficial versus harmful lunar exposure. Architects designed facilities with moon therapy in mind, creating spaces where attendants could control how much moonlight reached patients. Modern science shows no connection between moon phases and mental illness, though the myth persists. Emergency room workers still claim full moons bring more psychiatric cases, despite statistical analysis showing no correlation. Ancient moon madness beliefs influence contemporary thinking, even when evidence contradicts them. Actual mental illnesses require real treatment, medication, therapy, structured care. Exposing patients to moonlight while withholding effective interventions allowed preventable suffering. Some asylums used moon therapy as excuse to leave patients outside in all weather, calling neglect treatment, while people with treatable conditions deteriorated unnecessarily. Drinking dew for eternal youth. Alchemists and beauty seekers collected morning dew, believing water that formed overnight on plants absorbed mystical properties from moonlight and stars. Wealthy women woke before dawn, gathering dew to drink or wash their faces, convinced it prevented aging. Medieval recipes specified collection methods. Dew from rose petals supposedly enhanced beauty. Grass dew provided general health. Dew collected on May Day morning held maximum power. Some formulas required gathering dew with silver spoons under specific moon phases to capture optimal rejuvenating properties. Aristocrats employed servants specifically for dew collection. Workers would drape cloths over fields before sunrise, wring out absorbed dew, and present bottles to their employers. Families stored precious dew in sealed containers, treating it like valuable medicine rather than condensed water vapor. Beauty manuals recommended daily dew washing. Women would splash collected dew on their faces, believing it erased wrinkles and maintained youthful complexions. Some drank it mixed with wine or honey. Others used it exclusively for washing hair, convinced dew prevented graying. Dew is simply condensed atmospheric moisture, chemically identical to rain or tap water. It contains whatever pollutants, pollen, and microorganisms were in the air when it formed. No magical properties exist. Any skin benefits came from regular cleansing with water, not mystical dew powers. Yet dew collection for beauty purposes persisted into the 1900s. Rural communities maintained dew-gathering traditions long after urban areas abandoned them. Some modern natural beauty advocates still promote dew's benefits, continuing ancient superstitions repackaged as organic skincare. Eating ants for strength. Warriors and athletes across South America, Africa, and Asia consumed ants, believing these tiny insects transferred industriousness, strength, and endurance to whoever ate them. Leafcutter ants, fire ants, and other species became dietary staples in communities valuing their supposed power-giving properties. Indigenous Amazonians ate ants as initiation rituals. Young men proving themselves as warriors would consume handfuls of aggressive ant species, enduring painful stings inside their mouths while demonstrating toughness. Communities believed surviving ant consumption transferred the insect's legendary work ethic and collective strength. Some cultures made ant paste by grinding thousands of ants into protein-rich spreads. Others roasted them like nuts. A few consumed them live, allowing ants to bite tongues and throats, thinking pain enhanced strength transfer. Ant eggs were considered especially potent, harvested from colonies and eaten raw or cooked. Ants do contain protein and formic acid with antimicrobial properties. Modern entomophagy advocates correctly identify insects as nutritious food sources, but ancient anteaters believed mystical properties rather than understanding basic protein nutrition. Certain ant species produce toxins causing severe allergic reactions. People who consumed wrong species or too many ants experienced anaphylaxis, throat swelling, and sometimes death. Yet, communities continued the practice, blaming individual weakness rather than recognizing ant consumption dangers. Chocolate-covered ants became novelty foods in modern times, though mostly as dare items rather than serious nutrition. But historically, ant eating was dead serious practice, where communities genuinely believed insect consumption granted supernatural abilities beyond simple nourishment. Wearing red thread to stop bleeding. Across medieval Europe and Asia, people tied red thread around wounds, believing the color red magically drew blood back into the body and accelerated clotting. Households kept spools of red thread specifically for medical emergencies, applying it before any other treatment. Folk healers taught that color correspondence created healing effects. Red thread matched blood's color. Therefore, it controlled bleeding through sympathetic magic. Some traditions required silk thread, others specified wool. Most agreed the thread must be pure red, without any other colors mixed in. Application methods varied. Some wrapped red thread tightly around wounds like tourniquets. Others tied loose loops, believing the red color worked without physical pressure. A few burned red thread and applied the ash to bleeding sites, thinking concentrated red essence stopped blood flow more effectively. Communities developed red thread rituals for specific injuries. Nosebleeds required threading red yarn through nostrils. Menstrual problems needed red thread tied around waists. Deep cuts got red thread stitched directly through flesh. Accidentally discovering that suturing worked, but crediting the thread's color rather than understanding wound closure mechanics. Red thread occasionally helped through placebo effect or coincidental timing. Minor bleeding stops naturally within minutes. People tied red thread, bleeding stopped soon after, and they credited the thread. Survivorship bias reinforced beliefs as people ignored cases where red thread failed. Obviously, thread color has zero effect on blood clotting. Pressure stops bleeding through physical compression, not color magic. But red thread superstition persisted for centuries, with families treating colored yarn as essential first aid supply, using shadows to diagnose illness. Ancient healers examined patients' shadows, believing shadow distortions revealed hidden diseases and spiritual afflictions. Greek physicians studied shadow shapes cast on walls, claiming abnormal shadows indicated specific ailments requiring treatment. Shadow diagnosis involved elaborate protocols. Patients stood in precise positions relative to light sources, while healers scrutinized their projected silhouettes. Irregular shadow edges supposedly revealed tumors. Flickering shadows indicated fever. Dark shadows meant excess black bile. Pale shadows showed blood deficiency. Some practitioners required shadow examination at specific times of day, believing morning shadows revealed different information than afternoon ones. Others used colored lights, claiming shadows cast through colored glass exposed conditions invisible under normal light. Chinese medicine incorporated shadow reading into diagnostic practices. Physicians would observe shadows on translucent screens, interpreting variations as organ problems. Shadow length, density, and movement all supposedly provided medical information that physical examination missed. Obviously, shadows are optical projections, determined by light angle and object shape. They reveal nothing about internal health conditions. Any diagnostic accuracy was pure chance, or came from other observations healers made while examining patients. Yet shadow diagnosis gave healers an air of mystical insight. They could confidently declare hidden illnesses based on shadow interpretation, impressing patients with seemingly supernatural diagnostic abilities. When treatments failed, healers blamed misread shadows or claimed the disease was too advanced, never questioning whether shadow diagnosis was fundamentally nonsense. Medieval plague doctors sometimes used shadow examination to identify infected individuals, selecting victims for quarantine based entirely on lighting and imagination, drinking rainwater from corpses. In desperate times and bizarre rituals, people collected rainwater that pooled on corpses, believing water touching dead bodies absorbed death-defying properties. Some traditions required drinking water specifically from skulls or exposed bones, thinking it granted protection from mortality. Cemetery visitors during rainstorms would find water-filled depressions on gravestones or memorial statuary and consume it. Practitioners claimed this death water cured fatal illnesses by introducing the body to death essence in controlled amounts, essentially trying to vaccinate against dying by drinking corpse-contaminated water. Battlefield scavengers collected rainwater from helmets still on dead soldiers' heads. They'd sell these bottles to civilians, claiming warrior death water provided courage and protected against violent death. Buyers paid substantial sums for what was essentially stagnant water mixed with decomposition fluids. Some folk remedies required water collected from specific corpse locations: skull water for headaches, chest water for heart problems, hand water for arthritis. Healers developed elaborate theories about which body parts transferred which protective properties through rainwater contact. Obviously, corpse water contains bacteria, toxins, and decomposition byproducts. Drinking it risks serious infections, including cholera, dysentery, and countless bacterial diseases. People literally poisoned themselves while believing they were preventing death. Desperation drove the practice. During plague outbreaks, terrified people tried anything that seemed to offer protection. Cemeteries became water collection sites where visitors risked infection, thinking they were obtaining life-saving medicine, when they were actually just drinking contaminated water from graves. Eating moss from skulls. Medieval healers harvested moss growing on human skulls. Using it in medicines they claimed cured epilepsy, bleeding, and various afflictions. Known as usnea or skull moss, this lichen became valuable pharmaceutical ingredient, commanding high prices from desperate patients. Practitioners believed moss absorbed properties from the bones beneath it. Skull moss supposedly contained concentrated human essence, plus healing, compounds the lichen developed while feeding on cranial calcium. Pharmacies stocked dried skull moss, selling it like any legitimate herb. Execution sites and battlefields provided prime harvesting locations. Where skulls lay exposed long enough for moss to grow, collectors would scrape lichen carefully and preserve it for medical use. Some formulas required moss specifically from criminals' skulls. Others demanded warrior skulls or victims of specific death types. Physicians prescribed skull moss for nosebleeds, claiming it stopped bleeding through sympathetic magic. Moss from heads cured head-related bleeding. Epilepsy treatments incorporated it because moss's growth patterns supposedly calmed brain disturbances. No logical connection existed, yet medical authorities promoted skull moss for centuries. Moss is just lichen, fungus, and algae living symbiotically. Growing on skulls doesn't grant special properties. It's chemically identical to moss growing on trees or rocks. Some lichen species do contain compounds with mild antimicrobial effects, giving ancient practitioners that familiar kernel of truth to misinterpret wildly. Skull moss trade encouraged grave robbing and battlefield looting. Collectors desecrated burial sites searching for moss-covered remains. They'd even place fresh skulls in damp conditions to cultivate moss faster, treating human remains as lichen farms for pharmaceutical production. Wearing lodestones for attraction, people carried magnetic lodestones, believing these naturally magnetized rocks attracted good fortune, love, and success through supernatural magnetism. Beyond physical magnetic properties, practitioners Claimed lodestones drew desired outcomes into reality through mystical attraction forces. Love magic especially relied on lodestones. Singles wore them hoping to attract romantic partners. Couples exchanged lodestones believing it strengthened their bond. Some traditions required feeding lodestones with iron filings or magnetic sand to maintain their attractive powers, treating rocks like living things needing nourishment. Gamblers carried lodestones to attract winning outcomes. Merchants kept them in shops, believing they drew customers and sales. Job seekers wore lodestone amulets to interviews, convinced magnetic attraction would influence hiring decisions. Some ground lodestone into powder and consumed it, thinking internal magnetism increased their overall attractiveness. Lodestone positioning mattered. Wearing it over the heart attracted love. In pockets attracted money. Some practitioners created lodestone pairs, one for yourself, one for your desired target. Believing magnetic attraction would draw that person to you, whether they wanted it or not. Lodestones do exhibit natural magnetism from magnetite mineral content, but magnetic fields don't attract abstract concepts like love or luck. Physical magnetism affects only ferromagnetic materials, not human emotions or random chance. Yet lodestone magic persists in modern times. New Age shops sell attraction stones, promoting the same ancient beliefs with contemporary marketing. People still carry magnetized rocks, hoping to attract partners, prosperity, or success. Continuing practices that would have felt familiar to medieval magicians. Using bird droppings as medicine. For centuries, healers prescribed bird feces, claiming different species droppings cured different ailments. Nightingale droppings for skin conditions, pigeon waste for eye problems, owl excrement for asthma. Apothecaries stocked various bird droppings like they were legitimate pharmaceutical ingredients. Ancient Egyptian medical texts recommended mixing bird droppings with honey or milk to mask the taste. Roman physicians prescribed dove dung for baldness, instructing patients to rub it into their scalps daily. Medieval European healers used hawk droppings in cough remedies and respiratory treatments. Geisha, in Japan, used nightingale droppings as facial treatments, believing enzymes in the waist brightened and softened skin. Workers collected droppings from caged birds, dried and powdered them, then sold them to beauty-conscious clients. Wealthy women paid premium prices for what was essentially processed bird feces. Some droppings were consumed internally. Physicians ground dried bird waste into powder and mixed it into drinks or formed it into pills. Patients swallowed bird feces, believing it would cure their internal problems, ingesting bacteria, parasites, and pathogens along with useless waste material. Bird droppings contain uric acid and bacteria, including Salmonella and E. coli. Handling or consuming them risks serious infections, especially for people with compromised immune systems. Any perceived benefits were pure placebo or coincidental natural recovery. Interestingly, certain bird droppings do contain enzymes that break down proteins. Nightingale droppings genuinely have mild exfoliating properties, giving geisha facial treatments a tiny scientific basis. But most bird dropping medicine was dangerous nonsense that spread disease while claiming to cure it. Drinking water touched by kings. Royal touch water became valuable commodity across medieval Europe. People believed water kings dipped their fingers into acquired healing powers. Monarchs held ceremonies where they'd bless water, creating bottles that sold for enormous sums to desperate sick people. Kings of England and France practiced touching for the king's evil, laying hands on scrofular patients while blessing water simultaneously. Attendants collected this royal touched water, bottling it for distribution to subjects who couldn't access the king directly. Families treasured these bottles, using drops sparingly during medical emergencies. Some royal courts industrialized the process. Kings would spend hours touching water barrels, producing enough blessed water to supply their kingdoms. Attendants developed assembly lines, bringing vessels to the monarch, having him touch them briefly, then bottling and distributing the healed water. People paid months' wages for small vials of king-touched water. They'd drink it for serious illnesses, apply it to wounds, or save it for deathbed administration. Families passed down unused vials through generations, treating them as priceless heirlooms. Obviously, monarchs have no supernatural healing abilities. Water they touch remains ordinary water. Any healing came from natural recovery, placebo effects, or actual treatments people received alongside the royal water. Yet belief was so powerful that kings couldn't stop the practice even when they wanted to. Crowds mobbed them, demanding water blessings. Some monarchs spent substantial time performing water ceremonies, treating it as essential royal duty rather than embarrassing superstition. French Revolution ended the practice. Egalitarian ideals couldn't support kings having magical healing touch, while peasants lacked basic rights. Eating earth from holy sites. Pilgrims consumed soil from sacred locations, believing dirt from Jerusalem, Mecca, the Ganges, or other holy places contained divine essence that cured illness and protected souls. Religious tourism created massive dirt trade, with vendors selling authentic holy earth to believers worldwide. Christians ate earth from sites where Jesus walked. They'd collect soil near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, package it carefully, and transport it home as precious medicine. Sick family members would consume pinches of Jerusalem dirt mixed with water, convinced it carried Christ's healing power. Muslim pilgrims brought back Mecca soil in small pouches. Some ate it directly, others dissolved it in drinks. Families kept holy earth supplies for medical emergencies, treating it like sacred pharmacy stock. Pilgrimage guides included instructions on proper holy dirt collection and storage. Hindu traditions incorporated Ganges mud into various practices. Devotees would consume small amounts, believing it purified their souls and bodies. Despite knowing the Ganges contained pollution and human waste, believers trusted holiness overcame contamination. Buddhist sites had similar practices. Earth from locations Buddha visited became spiritual medicine. Monasteries sold blessed dirt to visitors, creating revenue streams around holy soil commerce. Obviously, dirt from holy sites is just dirt. Location doesn't alter soil's basic composition. Consuming any soil risks parasites, bacteria, and heavy metal exposure, problems that holiness doesn't magically prevent. Yet people still engage in these practices today. Pilgrims continue bringing home holy earth despite health warnings. Belief that sacred geography transfers through consumed soil persists across multiple religions. Ancient practice surviving into modern times. Wearing sachets of herbs for immunity, people wore fabric pouches filled with herbs around their necks, believing aromatic plants created protective barriers against disease and evil spirits. Plague doctors wore elaborate herb sachets. Common citizens carried simpler versions. Everyone trusted that herb-filled bags prevented infection through mysterious botanical forces. Medieval Europeans created pomanders, ornate metal balls with holes filled with expensive spices and herbs. Wealthy people dangled them from chains or belts, holding them to their noses when encountering foul smells or sick people. They genuinely believed inhaling herb vapors through pomanders blocked disease transmission. Poor families stuffed cloth pouches with whatever cheap herbs they could gather. Garlic, rosemary, thyme, lavender. Children wore these sachets constantly, never removing them even while sleeping. Parents believed adequate herb protection meant the difference between children surviving or dying during epidemics. Different herbs supposedly protected against different diseases: rue for plague, mint for fever, sage for respiratory problems. Communities developed complex herb recipes, competing over whose combination provided superior protection. Herbalists became wealthy, selling proven protective herb mixtures. Pleasant-smelling herbs may have masked unpleasant odors, making plague environments slightly more bearable, but they provided zero actual disease protection. Plague spreads through fleas and respiratory droplets, completely ignoring whatever herbs you're wearing. Modern aromatherapy echoes these ancient practices, though with more modest claims. Essential oil enthusiasts wear herb-infused jewelry or diffuse plant oils, sometimes claiming immune benefits similar to medieval herb sachets. The packaging changed. The superstition about plants creating protective barriers persists. Using rust as eye drops. Ancient physicians put iron rust directly into patients' eyes, believing it treated cataracts, infections, and vision problems. Egyptian medical texts recommended rust mixed with honey as eye medicine. Roman doctors prescribed rust water for various eye conditions. Practitioners reasoned that iron strength would transfer to weakened eyes. They'd scrape rust from old weapons or tools, grind it into powder, then mix it with liquids for eye application. Some formulas added wine or milk to carry rust particles into the eye. Patients endured agonizing treatments. Rust particles scratched corneas, causing pain and often worsening vision problems. Iron oxide introduced infections into already vulnerable eyes. Many people went blind from rust treatments that were supposed to restore their sight. Different rust sources supposedly had different properties. Rust from swords treated battle-related eye injuries. Rust from agricultural tools helped farmers' vision. Rust from ships cured sailors' eye problems. Practitioners developed elaborate theories about rust's spiritual connection to its original iron source. Iron compounds can be toxic, especially when introduced directly to sensitive tissues like eyes. Rust contains iron oxide, plus whatever contaminants the original metal collected: bacteria, dirt, chemical residues. Putting this mixture into eyes guaranteed irritation at minimum, potentially causing permanent damage. Yet rust eye treatments persisted for centuries. Medical authorities included them in textbooks. Healers passed down rust remedy recipes through generations. Patients submitted to painful procedures, trusting physicians knew what they were doing, when those physicians were actually scraping rusty metal into people's eyes and calling it medicine. Drinking wine with added poison. Roman emperors and wealthy elites consumed wine mixed with small amounts of poison, believing gradual exposure built immunity to assassination attempts. Known as Mithridatism, after King Mithridates VI, this practice involved systematically poisoning yourself to survive future poisoning. Practitioners started with tiny poison doses in wine, gradually increasing amounts over months or years. They'd consume arsenic, snake venom, or plant toxins daily, enduring sickness while hoping to develop resistance. Some claimed success, though many died from accumulated poisoning before achieving immunity. Royal families especially embraced Mithridatism. Paranoid rulers feared assassination by poisoned food or drink, so they preemptively poisoned themselves as protection. They'd employ poison tasters and simultaneously consume their own poison doses. Double protection against treachery. Physicians created elaborate poison wine recipes. Different poisons required different wines. Specific mixing ratios supposedly maximized immunity while minimizing immediate harm. Medical texts described optimal poison progression schedules, treating systematic self-poisoning as legitimate preventative medicine. Modern toxicology shows limited immunity is possible for certain poisons. The body can develop some tolerance through repeated low-dose exposure, but most poisons cause cumulative damage regardless of tolerance. Arsenic accumulates in organs. Mercury causes progressive neurological harm. People who practiced Mithridatism often died from chronic poisoning while believing they were protecting themselves. Some actually did develop partial immunity to specific toxins, reinforcing belief in the practice, despite many failures. Survivors became famous for drinking poison without dying, not realizing they'd permanently damaged their health through years of self-poisoning. Eating raw liver for anemia. Before understanding iron deficiency, physicians prescribed raw liver, believing fresh organ meat contained concentrated life force that cured weakness and paleness. Patients with anemia consumed raw liver slices daily, often gagging through the treatment while desperately hoping for improvement. Ancient Egyptians fed raw liver to anemic patients. Roman physicians recommended it for soldiers weakened by blood loss. The practice continued through medieval times and into the early 20th century, doctors specifically requiring liver be eaten raw, claiming cooking destroyed its healing essence. Interestingly, this actually worked, though not for mystical reasons. Liver contains high iron concentrations, plus vitamin B12 and folate, nutrients critical for red blood cell production. Anemic patients eating raw liver did improve because they were finally getting nutrients they lacked. But practitioners didn't understand why it worked. They credited liver's supposed life force or humoral properties rather than recognizing nutritional chemistry. This led to bizarre variations. Some insisted on animal liver eaten while still warm from slaughter. Others required human liver for treating humans, leading to extremely disturbing practices. Raw liver carries serious infection risks. Parasites, bacteria, and viruses thrive in uncooked organ meat. Many patients developed parasitic infections or food poisoning while treating their anemia. Some contracted trichinosis or toxoplasmosis from contaminated raw liver. Modern medicine recognizes liver's nutritional value but recommends cooking it thoroughly. Iron supplements provide the same benefits without infection risks. Ancient doctors accidentally discovered effective anemia treatment, then made it unnecessarily dangerous by requiring raw consumption and inventing mystical explanations for straightforward nutrition. Wearing wolfskin to gain courage. Warriors wore wolf pelts, believing the predator's fierce nature transferred to whoever donned its skin. Viking berserkers dressed in wolf hides before battles, convinced it granted supernatural fighting abilities. Soldiers across cultures wrapped themselves in wolf fur, thinking it made them fearless and unstoppable. Beyond simple pelts, some warriors wore entire wolf heads as helmets, with the animal's face positioned above their own. They'd fight while looking through the wolf's open jaws, believing they channeled the creature's hunting prowess and pack mentality. Coming-of-age ceremonies required young men to hunt and kill wolves bare-handed or with minimal weapons. Successfully killing a wolf and wearing its skin supposedly transformed boys into warriors. Communities judged manhood by whether initiates could acquire and wear wolf pelts. Wolf fur became valuable military commodity. Armies recruited wolf hunters specifically to supply pelts for soldiers. Some units required all members to wear wolfskin components, believing coordinated wolf magic created unstoppable fighting forces. Wolfskin provided some practical benefits: warmth in cold climates, intimidating appearance that might unsettle enemies. But wearers believed in literal courage transfer rather than understanding psychological warfare and practical insulation. Overhunting for military wolfskins devastated wolf populations across Europe and Asia. Entire regions lost their wolves because armies needed constant pelt supplies. Ecosystems suffered as apex predators disappeared. All because warriors thought wearing dead wolves made them braver. Modern special forces sometimes use wolf imagery in unit insignias, echo of ancient beliefs that wolf characteristics somehow transfer to humans through symbolic association. Using owl eyes in potions, healers harvested owl eyes, grinding them into potions they claimed improved night vision, enhanced wisdom, and cured eye diseases. Practitioners reasoned that owls' exceptional night sight would transfer to humans through consuming their ocular tissue. Medieval European apothecaries stocked dried owl eyes alongside other exotic ingredients. Physicians prescribed owl eye powder mixed with wine for patients with failing vision. Some formulas required fresh eyes removed from recently killed owls. Others used dried and aged eyes ground into fine powder. Beyond vision problems, owl eyes supposedly transferred the bird's wisdom. Students drank owl eye tonics before examinations, hoping to absorb owl intelligence. Scholars kept owl eye amulets, believing it enhanced their analytical abilities. Military strategists consumed them, thinking it improved tactical thinking. Different owl species supposedly provided different benefits. Barn owl eyes for general vision improvement, eagle owl eyes for distant sight, screech owl eyes for seeing in darkness. Practitioners developed detailed taxonomies of which owl eyes treated which conditions. Owl populations suffered from medicinal harvesting. Hunters specifically targeted owls for their eyes, killing birds and discarding bodies after removing the valuable organs. Some regions lost their owl populations entirely to eye trade, disrupting ecosystems that depended on these nocturnal predators for rodent control. Owl eyes contain the same basic components as any vertebrate eyes: photoreceptor cells, lens tissue, and fluid. Nothing magical or transferable exists in owl ocular anatomy. Consuming ground owl eyes provided zero vision benefits, while devastating owl populations and wasting money on useless folk medicine. Drinking melted snow for purity. Across mountain communities and spiritual traditions, people consumed water from melted snow, believing frozen precipitation possessed purity that regular water lacked. Monasteries collected snow for drinking, treating it as spiritually cleansed water superior to springs or wells. Practitioners taught that snow formed in heaven's upper atmosphere absorbed divine essence during its descent. Water that froze and fell from sky supposedly carried celestial properties that purified both body and soul. Wealthy families paid premiums for snow water, treating it like premium bottled water centuries before commercial water industries existed. Some traditions required snow from specific mountains or collected during certain seasons. First snow of winter held maximum purity. Snow from sacred peaks contained extra spiritual power. Alpine monasteries built their reputations partly on access to pure mountain snow water. Alchemists incorporated snow water into their formulas, believing its purity made it ideal for dissolving metals and creating elixirs. Physicians prescribed snow water for patients with various conditions, claiming its cleanliness prevented disease better than regular water sources. Reality check. Snow accumulates atmospheric pollutants during formation and falling. It collects dust, pollen, bacteria, and whatever chemicals float in the air. Snow in polluted areas contains concentrated contaminants. Even pure mountain snow isn't magically cleaner than properly sourced spring water. It's just frozen precipitation with whatever it picked up from the atmosphere. Modern understanding shows melted snow can be safe drinking water if collected properly, but offers no purity advantages over other clean water sources. Ancient snow water believers confused different, frozen, with better, purified, creating unnecessary mysticism around basic H2O in solid form. Eating beetles for digestion. Traditional medicine systems prescribed beetle consumption, believing these armored insects improved digestive function and cured stomach problems. Chinese medicine used ground beetles in formulas. European folk healers recommended eating specific beetle species for various gastrointestinal complaints. Practitioners developed beetle pharmacology, dung beetles for constipation, ironic given their diet, ground beetles for general digestion, stag beetles for strength and vitality. Some recipes required live beetles swallowed whole. Others used dried and powdered beetle bodies mixed into drinks. Beyond digestion, beetles supposedly treated other conditions. Shiny beetle shells ground into powder became aphrodisiacs. Large beetle horns symbolized male virility, so consuming them allegedly enhanced sexual function. Beetle blood, mixed into tonics, promised various health benefits. Cantharides, beetles, known as Spanish fly, became infamous aphrodisiacs, despite being dangerously toxic. The compound cantharidin causes severe irritation, blistering, and potentially fatal poisoning. Yet people consumed it anyway, confusing irritation-induced physical reactions with genuine arousal. Most beetles are technically edible and contain protein, giving beetle eating a tiny nutritional foundation. But they provide no special digestive benefits beyond basic insect protein. Some species contain toxins, causing illness or allergic reactions. Eating random beetles risked poisoning, while offering zero therapeutic advantages. Beetle consumption continues in some cultures today as food rather than medicine. Roasted beetles appear as street food snacks. Modern entomophagy correctly identifies insects as sustainable protein, but ancient beetle medicine went far beyond nutrition, attributing mystical digestive powers to armored bugs that were just crunchy protein sources. Wearing snakeskin for protection, warriors and travelers wore shed snakeskin, believing it provided supernatural protection against bites, poison, and evil spirits. Families kept snakeskins in homes as defensive amulets. Soldiers wrapped snakeskin strips around weapons or armor, thinking it enhanced their defensive capabilities. Snake's ability to shed its skin symbolized renewal and transformation, leading people to attribute protective rebirth powers to the discarded skin. Wearing it supposedly allowed humans to shed bad luck or illness like snakes shed old skin. Different snake species' skins offered different protections. Cobra skin protected against poison. Python skin provided physical strength. Rattlesnake's skin warned of danger through spiritual connection to the snake's warning rattle. Practitioners developed elaborate theories about which snakeskins protected against which threats. Beyond wearing, people burned snakeskin and inhaled the smoke, believing it purified spaces and repelled evil. Others ground dried snakeskin into powder for consumption, thinking internal protection worked better than external. Some hung snakeskins over doorways like horseshoes, creating mystical barriers. Snake populations suffered from skin harvesting. Hunters killed snakes specifically for their hides, creating snakeskin markets that threatened certain species. Ironically, killing snakes often increased actual snakebite danger by removing predators that controlled rodent populations, which attracted more snakes. Snakeskin contains keratin and collagen, same proteins in human skin and nails. Wearing it provides zero supernatural protection. Any defensive benefits came from thick, leather-like material, offering minor physical barrier, not mystical snake essence repelling harm. Modern fashion still uses snakeskin, though as luxury material rather than protective charm, mostly. Using bat wings in remedies. Healers across Asia, Europe, and the Americas harvested bat wings, grinding them into powders, or steeping them in liquids to create remedies for vision problems, night terrors, and various mysterious ailments. Bats' nocturnal abilities inspired beliefs that their body parts transferred darkness navigation powers. Chinese medicine incorporated bat parts into formulas for improving eyesight. Practitioners reasoned that creatures flying perfectly in complete darkness must possess vision-enhancing properties. Patients consumed ground bat wings believing it cured blindness or enhanced night vision. European folk medicine used bat wings differently. Hanging dried bat wings in bedrooms supposedly prevented nightmares. Burning bat wing ash and inhaling the smoke allegedly cured respiratory problems. Some traditions required nailing bat wings to door frames for protection against evil spirits. Vampire mythology intensified bat wing demand. People believed vampire bats held supernatural properties, making their wings especially valuable. Practitioners charged premium prices for genuine vampire bat wings, though most were probably common fruit or insect-eating bats misidentified for profit. Bat populations crashed in regions with active bat wing trade. Hunters decimated colonies, disrupting ecosystems that depended on bats for insect control and pollination. Cave-dwelling bat species faced particular danger. Entire colonies destroyed by hunters seeking wings. Bat wings contain the same basic tissues as any mammal: bone, cartilage, skin membrane. No mystical vision properties exist. Consuming or wearing bat parts provided zero medical benefits while spreading diseases. Bats carry rabies and numerous zoonotic viruses that can transfer to humans through handling. Drinking liquid from bog bodies. In northern Europe, people discovered preserved corpses in peat bogs, and some actually collected liquids seeping from these ancient bodies to drink as medicine. Known as corpse water or bog juice, this fluid supposedly contained preservative properties that would extend the drinker's life. Peat's natural preservation creates an acidic, oxygen-poor environment that mummifies bodies for centuries. When people found these remarkably preserved ancient corpses, they reasoned that whatever kept the bodies intact could preserve living humans too. They'd collect dark liquid pooling around bog bodies and bottle it for consumption. Folk healers sold bog body water, claiming it cured aging, prevented decay, and extended lifespan. Desperate elderly people drank it, hoping to halt their decline. Some believed consuming liquid from bodies preserved for thousands of years would grant them similar longevity. Beyond drinking, people applied bog liquid to wounds, believing it prevented infection through the same preservation process that maintained the corpses. They'd soak bandages in bog water, wrap injuries, and trust that ancient preservation magic would protect them from gangrene. Bog water is incredibly acidic and contains decomposition byproducts, harmful bacteria, and concentrated organic compounds from centuries of decay. Drinking it risked severe poisoning. The tannins that preserve bodies don't preserve living tissue. They're simply acidic compounds that slow bacterial growth in specific conditions. And that's all 100 ancient practices that made absolutely no sense. From drilling holes in skulls to drinking bog body juice, our ancestors tried everything imaginable to cure disease, gain power, and control their destinies, creating a legacy of bizarre beliefs we can now look back on and say, what were they thinking?